It's the 6th console generation, and the competition is fierce. The first to release for the generation was the short-lived but fondly looked back on Sega Dreamcast, that released in 1998 in Japan and 1999 everywhere else. It had its fair share of great games, like the Forklift Racer and Sailor Searching Simulator Shenmue, and Phantasy Star Online, which used the Dreamcast's at the time revolutionary online functionality. The second to release was the generational giant known as Sony's PlayStation 2, which released in the year 2000 for most countries. It stood all on its own in terms of units sold, and backing up how much units it sold was its enormous list of games to choose from, like the, at the time, fever dream sounding action RPG Kingdom Hearts, which had the odd pairing of Disney and Final Fantasy characters. And then there was the little-known, controversial open-world action-adventure game Grand Theft Auto 3. The third console was the newcomer, Microsoft's Xbox, that released in late 2001 in North America and early 2002 everywhere else. And to Microsoft's credit, they came out swinging with some strong releases, like the console-selling and genre-defining first-person shooter Halo, and the critically acclaimed fighting game Dead or Alive 3. The fourth and final 6th generation console, and the one we'll be focusing on, was Nintendo's GameCube, that was released in late 2001 in Japan and North America, and mid to late 2002 everywhere else. This small purple cube was the successor to their previous console, the Nintendo 64, which sold an impressive 32 million units worldwide. But when compared to Sony's previous console, these numbers were small, as the PlayStation 1 sold over 100 million units worldwide. So Nintendo had high hopes for their brand new console. To help with console sales, and to shed their family-friendly only label, Nintendo and Capcom struck a deal to exclusively release their Biohazard series, aka Resident Evil, on the GameCube only. This deal involved them porting over REs 2, 3, and Code Veronica, as well as releasing 2 brand new Resident Evil games. The first to hit the console, and the subject of this video, was the Resident Evil 1 Remake, released in 2002, with Resident Evil 0 releasing later that same year. There was also a deal called the Capcom 5 between them and Nintendo, but that subject is for another video entirely. Pre-production for the Resident Evil Remake began in late 1999, due to there being issues with the development of the Nintendo 64 version of Resident Evil 0, and Resident Evil 4 turning into Devil May Cry. This led the series veteran and now executive producer of Capcom Studio 4, Shinji Mikami, to plan out the release of 2 brand new Resident Evil games. One would be a new version of Resident Evil 4, and the other would be a remake of the first game in the series. Mikami would once again sit in the director's position, and a team that consisted of only a small handful of people would be assembled a year later. That small group would mainly be programmers, and they were led by software engineer Hideaki Motozuka, and he and his team were tasked with learning how to work with the GameCube. A whole year would fly by before anything would really come of this, and during that time, the role of producer would be given to Capcom veteran Hiroyuki Kobayashi. A group of completely different teams would be working on the game's cutscenes, with Shimako Sato and Shinji Mikami directing. In early 2001, Mikami would reach out to Toshiya Katani with the request that he develop the in-game cutscenes. Katani was already working on Devil May Cry at the time, but he still accepted the offer. When he joined, he requested a team of 12 people to create 70 minutes of cutscenes. Of those 12, he needed 2 motion capture editors and 10 facial animators. The issue was that they couldn't find 12 people, which led to them outsourcing to Tokyo-based company Lynx Digitalworks. Katani and crew then had 4 months to complete the cutscenes, and this turned into a real mess, as they had different groups creating different scenes with no real way to keep consistency. This led to them bringing on professional cameraman Hidekazu Gondo, and with his help, they scrapped what they made and recreated each and every scene. But this had its drawbacks, as they had to push their deadline back by 3 whole months. It was now late 2001, and they just showed off footage of the remake to the world. And by that point, the deal with Nintendo was already struck, with a release date set for March 22, 2002. That gave the developers 7 more months of production before the game's release date. Though it wasn't a smooth time, as the game's development still had its fair share of problems going forward, with the 2 major ones being the script and the direction the remake was headed. When Capcom made the decision to remake Resident Evil, it was originally going to be a 1-to-1 remake. With that in mind, Shinji Mikami believed the script created by Kenichi Iwao for the 1996 version would work just fine, with them making minor changes to it when needed. And because of that belief, they didn't bring on their usual head writer Noboru Sugimura to write a new script. A couple months passed, and the new year was closing in. The development team were also nearing completion of the game, with many of them being ecstatic over the notion of hitting deadline. But that's when Shinji Mikami walked in and had a look at the work that was completed, and what he saw troubled him. He realized that this project was the same exact experience as the 1996 version, with there being no differences besides a new coat of paint. Shinji Mikami, being the perfectionist that he is, made the decision to transform the experience. It was now a full-blown remake, with him telling all the department heads to have everyone add new areas and enemies to the game, as he wanted it to feel new. This led to 2 full months of crunch, with everyone working every single day, and with new things being added, the script needed to be altered. But they lacked a writer of any sort, which led to Mikami and company to alter it personally. To add upon the already hellish work conditions, the flu started making its rounds to everyone in the development team. With there only being a couple short months to craft this into a new experience, there was no real way to tell if they would make the March 22nd release window. But to everyone on the development team's credit, they managed to do it, and with flying colors. When the Resident Evil Remake released, it was showered with praise, with many pointing out to how scary it was due to how realistic the game looked. There were some that criticized the game's tank controls, though that was pretty much it when it came to the game's downsides. A downside that was outside of their control was the GameCube's sales numbers. Throughout its lifespan, the GameCube sold just over 21 million units. It was outsold by the newcomer Xbox that sold over 24 million units, and the PlayStation 2 that sold a monstrous 160 million units. But even with the Resident Evil Remake being a GameCube exclusive, it went on to sell over 1.35 million copies worldwide. Afterwards, it would continue to be a Nintendo exclusive for quite some time, with the only re-release being in 2008 for the Wii, called Resident Evil Archives. And there it would stay until January 2015, when it finally graced us with its presence on both Sony and Microsoft consoles, plus PC. But it wasn't just a re-release like the Wii version. They updated the graphics once again, and gave it the name of Resident Evil HD Remaster. This is when its sales numbers skyrocketed, with the final sales number between all platforms totaling to 6.1 million copies sold. And that's where we're at today, with me going over the HD Remaster version. This will be done in the same fashion as my other RE videos. If you know, you know. If not, then prepare yourself as I throw comedy into the mix while covering the story. And while going through the story, I'll cover gameplay mechanics, cutscenes, and graphics. And afterwards, I'll talk about my thoughts on the whole experience, and then go over the game's unlocks, audio, and voice actors. And since I'm going over the whole experience, there will be spoilers. So if you want to play the game yourself, please do so first, and then come back to this video, if you remember. Also, while I do make jokes about the game, it's all in good fun and not to be taken seriously. So just keep that in mind for future reference. To start things off, I will cover Jill's scenario first, and Chris's second. And after each of their scenarios, I will cover all the story differences that can happen throughout. I will try to be covering everything here, but I'm not perfect. So if you don't see a scene in this video, then please point it out in the comments. Alright, we can now kick off the story segment of the video. But we must choose how we like to exercise first, which is this game's silly way of asking what difficulty we'd like to play on for our very first playthrough. I'll complain about this later, so let's just move on with the story of the Resident Evil Remake. It begins with Jill and the rest of STAR's Alpha team flying over the Raccoon City forest, searching for Bravo team, who went missing during their mission some time ago. The mission was to investigate a string of cannibalistic murders done by a group of about 10 people in Raccoon City. Somehow, this led Bravo team to the middle of the forest, and this is where Alpha team discovers their derelict helicopter. Inside it is the body of Kevin, the second most reliable pilot of STAR's, right behind my main man Brad Vickers, Alpha team's pilot and the guy that definitely won't be leaving his team stranded when shit hits the fan. While searching for the remaining members, Alpha team member and bandana enthusiast Joseph Frost hears growls behind him. He turns to look and finds that nothing is there, only for something to come rushing straight towards him.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Oh God, Joe, help me.
Jill?
I'm dying. Shoot him.
You gonna help the poor man? After having ample time to devour Joseph, a zombie dog, known as a Cerberus, turns its attention to Jill, but is shot by Chris right before it clamps its jaws down onto her. While fleeing the remaining dogs, the two see Brad, and now second most reliable STAR's pilot, flying away, leaving Alpha team stranded. Much to their relief, they see a mansion sitting right in front of them, and race towards it to escape the dogs.
There are only 3 STARS members left now. Captain Wesker, Captain Barry, and Captain myself. We don't know where Captain Chris is.
Jesus, you guys need that many captains? Somehow, Chris missed the front door, and is missing when the remaining STARS members take roll call. Jill almost heads back out to look for him, but is stopped by Wesker. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out from nearby. Jill and Barry go to investigate, leaving Wesker behind in the main hall. The first room the two enter is a dining room, and at the far end by a fireplace is a puddle of blood. This is when Barry decides it's best they split up, with Jill exploring more of the mansion while he stares at the puddle of blood, acting like he's doing something. Jill's exploration is cut short though, when she arrives at the location where the gunshot was heard. This puts her face to back with her very first zombie. Jill rightfully nopes the fuck out, and runs back into the dining room where it takes Barry a staggering 3 rounds from his .44 Magnum to deal with the zombie. She informs him of the death of Bravo team member Kenneth Sullivan, which is the guy the zombie was chewing on, and the two decide it's best to report back to Wesker. But much to their dismay, he vanished. And after the world's quickest search party, Barry and Jill once again decide to make the horror game and movie decision to split up. But not before he hands her the greatest item in all of horror media, the lockpick. But gone are the days of the master of unlocking, as we are now in the 21st century. The century where people can now read dialogue like actual human beings. But I'm still gonna play that clip, goddammit.
We could get into trouble if we get lost. We should start from the first floor, okay? And Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Thanks.
With Jill alone once again, she can now freely explore the mansion, which takes her right behind the main staircase, where a mysterious metal gate is located. On each of the doors is an umbrella-looking symbol, and when she tries to enter, she hears groaning and chains moving. Thankfully, the door is locked, which I'm sure everyone in their right minds would not want to set foot through. So instead of questioning if there is someone down there in need of medical help, she heads back to Kenneth, who definitely doesn't need medical help. On his corpse is a potentially vital video that he died protecting. What's on it, you ask? Hard to say, as the entire mansion lacks a single goddamn video player to use it on. So we will just have to wait until one becomes available. Through the door nearby and up a set of stairs leads to a hallway filled with mirrors. Near its end is a statue with a golden arrow sticking out of it. Inspecting it reveals that its arrowhead can be detached from the rest of the arrow, which can then be used on a statue to open up a passageway in the graveyard that sits right outside the main hall. The passage takes Jill down to a crypt, where the only thing of use at the moment is the Book of Curses that sits atop a slab. Embedded on its back is a key with a sword symbol, and taking it out opens the book up, revealing its contents. It mentions 4 masks, one that speaks no evil, one that smells no evil, one that sees no evil, and the unluckiest one of them all, one that can't see, speak, or smell jack shit. The key Jill obtained unlocks a door in the art room on the first floor. If you've played the original Resident Evil 1, then you know what to expect here. Midway through the hall, it's not gonna happen after all. Well, I guess this hallway is safe to travel through anytime now. Oh shit! Going through the door at the end of the hall takes Jill to yet another hall. Exciting shit, I know. A metal door right by her leads outside where a bag of herbicide sits. This does have a use, and not one that ends up making my non-existent lawn look any better, but for something that will reveal itself a bit later. Another door in the hall takes Jill to a tiny-ass room made of marble, and through it is a living room where the shotgun can be found. Grabbing it isn't easy though, as... oh, never mind. Going back through the same door she came in from shows us that it wasn't as easy as it appeared, as the marble room doors are both locked, and the ceiling is slowly coming down to crush Jill. With no other alternative, Jill screams out for help instead of blasting through the door with her newly acquired shotgun. Thankfully, the big, brawny, beautiful bearded bastard Barry blows in through the wind to hear her screams. If he decided to use the same type of logic that Jill does, then he's just in time to hear her get crushed. But to his credit, he uses his .44 Magnum to blast the door open, giving him just enough time to drag Jill out of the room before her flattening. I do find it hilarious that the door transition scene here shows her being dragged out as well. Once she's out, Barry quips that she was close to being able to fit inside a sandwich. She brushes the bad joke aside and thanks him, but questions why he is here, as he said he would be on the opposite side of the mansion looking for clues. His answer is kind of flimsy, saying he had something he wanted to check. Nothing more, nothing less. I mean, there's no need to question him. It's not like anyone will betray us, right? They split up once again, with Jill continuing through the hall and making it to her first save room. On the floor is a lone fuel canteen, which is one of the game's many new additions. But we'll get to that. Above the save room is a lighter, a dog whistle with a photo, and a note mentioning a dog on the mansion's second floor balcony. Heading in that direction, Jill runs into Barry yet again, who comes up with the genius plan of finding a back door to escape through. Not the hundreds of windows or the side door Jill took to grab the herbicide, but a mysterious, non-existent back door that will somehow not lead them back into the forest hellhole where the zombie dogs ate poor Joseph and Kevin. Barry's plan is so bad, Jill even whips out some Italian to wish him well.
Ciao.
Good luck, Barry. You're gonna need it. A quick question I wanted to add here while Jill heads to the balcony is about her saying ciao. Do the subtitles still say that in the Italian version's text? Or does she say bye in another language? I know they didn't get any voice actors for that version, but I'm still curious. And I'm too lazy to look it up. So, if you know, then please comment the answer. Using the dog whistle on the balcony summons a Cerberus with a collar around its neck. After swiftly dealing with the thing, Jill opens up the collar and out drops a coin that turns into an imitation key. This can replace the real version of the key on the 3rd floor, and this is absolutely required, because if Jill takes the real key without replacing it, she gets locked in the hallway with this horny knight statue slowly moving towards her.
Oh yeah.
Thankfully, the real key can be put back into its slot if you don't have the imitation version, in order to avoid this fate. The real key that was picked up is the armor key, which gives Jill access to more rooms in the mansion, most of which are crucial for advancing further in the game. But one of the rooms that isn't important is the fish tank room, where we discover Barry looking over some file. Instead of announcing her presence, Jill decides to give poor old Barry a heart attack by sitting behind him creepily until he notices. He hands the file over to Jill to look over and, "Oh God, Barry! Why aren't you wearing any pants?"
What do you make of it?
Well, I guess we were right about this mansion being quite unnatural.
You have a way with understatements.
Where's the part that's torn off?
Well, my only guess is that it was the most important part and somebody didn't want anyone to see it. Let's continue our investigation.
Jill, would you stop looking at it? With that absolute nightmare over with, the room contains a small puzzle involving a bee specimen, a bee fishing lure without a hook, and an actual hook. All you have to do is combine the hook with the lure, and then switch the spots where you obtain the specimen and lure. Pressing the button below the newly placed specimen reveals the wind crest. But when Jill tries to grab it, the bee somehow comes alive and causes her to violently convulse.
Oh, no, not the bee!
But with it being just a single bee, it poses no real threat, so Jill can just casually grab the crest and leave. Back down towards the save room, Jill discovers an apology letter from Barry, with him having placed a few helpful items in the room, with the most notable being flame rounds for Jill's non-existent grenade launcher. Speaking of which, using the armor key on the lower right door on the 2nd floor of the main hall takes Jill to another balcony, where she discovers the body of fellow STARS member Forrest Whitaker. Forrest Speyer. When Jill inspects his body, she for some reason says he has given up the ghost. Back when I first played this, I thought this was a bit of bad translation, but it's actually a real term that was coined in the 16th century. So I guess we got a historian on our hands here. Sitting beside Forrest's body is the grenade launcher that we so desperately need. The second door to use the armor key on the 2nd floor leads to an encounter with Bravo Team's comms expert, Richard Aiken, who has definitely seen better days. When asked what did this to him, he tells Jill that it was a giant poisonous snake, and he tasks her with grabbing a serum that lies on the opposite side of the mansion. When she returns with said serum, Jill injects it into him, saving his miserable little life. And as a reward, Richard gives her his radio, and decides to stay put and rest. In a hallway past Hamburger Arm is a locked door and a pitch-dark dining room. In there, and behind a movable cupboard, is a cabinet that can't be inspected due to this surprisingly being one of the few dark rooms in the game. The way to change that is by lighting a couple candles with her lighter. Inside the now viewable cabinet is the middle section of a musical score, the missing sections of which can be found past yet another armored door leading to the bar on the 1st floor. Pushing yet another cabinet reveals the score's missing sections. And would you look at that? There's a piano in here as well. Using the musical score on it allows Jill to show off her sweet piano playing prowess. Once she is finished playing, a wall opens up nearby, where a statue with a golden shield sits underneath it. Grabbing the shield forces the wall to close, locking Jill inside the small room. Yeah, she could have just ran out before it did due to how slow it was, but that would fuck up this item swap puzzle, and we can't have that happen. The way to avoid being locked in here for an eternity requires Jill to replace the gold shield with the wooden one that sat above the fireplace in the dining room. But before placing the gold one above the fireplace, there is a diary that sits by Jill's feet. Its owner's name is George Trevor, and they wrote about how they'd been held captive inside the mansion for security purposes. But he knew the actual answer, as he was the only person besides the mansion's owner, a Sir Spencer, to know about the mansion's secrets. So with him out of the way, there would be no way of them getting out. He then prayed that his wife Jessica and daughter Lisa were safe, but recalled hearing one of the men in lab coats that were holding him saying that something had already happened to them. The next day, he managed to escape the room he was held in, but had the tall task of actually escaping the booby-trap-filled mansion. Taking the gold shield back to the dining room and placing it above the fireplace opens up a small door on a nearby grandfather clock. On the clock are 4 symbols, each with their own color. There is a helmet marked with the color red, a shield with the color yellow, a sword with the color blue, and armor with the color green. Below them are a bunch of gears that lie inside the small opening that was revealed when the shield was placed on the wall. Etched on the clock is a small message reading, "When the two have run each other through, the path to your destiny will open." A painting near the clock gives away the answer to this puzzle. 2 men have run each other through with their swords. The man in red stabbed the guy in green in the stomach with a small sword, and the guy in green stabbed the guy in red in the face with a long sword. So matching the clock's hands to the same position shown on the painting results in the big hand pointing to the helmet and the small hand pointing to the armor. When done correctly, the clock shifts to the side, where a small hole in the wall can be seen. In it is the shield key, and this is where we can finally kickstart the main task of finding the 4 death masks strewn about the mansion. These can be done in any order of your choosing from this point, as 3 of the 4 emblem keys have been obtained. The mask without a mouth can be found in the large gallery behind an armored door key on the 1st floor. In the center of the room are 3 different colored mosaic portraits, and at the end of the room is a mosaic portrait of a woman named Lisa, with 3 different colored objects on her: a green crown, a purple necklace, and an orange bracelet. Below it is a small inscription that reads, "Lisa, protected by the 3 spirits." Below the portrait is a button, but let's not press it just yet. Inspecting the other 3 portraits shows each one of them wearing one of the specific items: a valiant with a bracelet, a saint with a crown, and a sage with a necklace. Below each are 3 buttons, with 3 more on the other side of the wall. Pressing them turns on a colored light that changes the color of the portraits. So, here is the correct order for each one. Pressing the first button for the Valiant by the entryway turns it orange. Pressing the second button for the Saint turns it green, and the second button for the Sage turns it purple. With them lit up in their correct colors, pressing the button below Lisa's portrait lifts the wall up, taking Jill to a locked little section of the cemetery where the death mask sits. The mask without eyes, nose, or mouth lies in the armor room behind an armored door on the 2nd floor. Upon entry, 4 suits of armor slide to the center of the room, where a switch sits. An inscription by the switch reads, "Woe to those who disturb my sleep." Now, I'd be lying if I said I knew how to solve this puzzle without resorting to trial and error. So I won't be doing that. Instead, I'll just cut right to the correct order in which Jill needs to push these suits of armor in. The first is the suit of armor wielding the spear, then the one wielding the axe, and finally, the one carrying the shield. The 4th suit will slide in on its own when this is done correctly. Pressing the button in the center of the room opens up a small gate that was housing a box. The box itself is also a small puzzle. On its lid is a sun and moon, with a plate saying, "Sunshine will awaken me." On each side of the box is a button and a half of the sun and moon. Pressing just the sun buttons unlocks the box, which gives Jill the second mask. The mask with no nose is in the attic. That's behind the only shield door, just past the hallway where Richard is resting. If you remember way back when Jill first ran into Richard, he warned her of a giant snake slithering around. Even though Jill has come across zombies and zombie dogs, this sounds a little far-fetched. I mean, come on. How could there be a giant snake? Holy shit! Thankfully, she doesn't have to deal with it alone, as Richard has come to return the favor by drawing its attention with his combat shotgun. This gives Jill just enough time to rush to the end of the room to grab the death mask. And here is where a couple of choices can be made. The first and most hilarious one is Jill just getting the fuck out as quick as possible, leaving poor Richard all alone against the snake. Outside the room, Jill can hear him scream out, and if she walks back in, Richard is nowhere to be found. But the thing that still can be found is the giant-ass snake. I'm sure you can surmise what happened to our friend Richard. The second choice is staying in the attic and dishing out enough damage to defeat the snake. Jill and Richard then decide it's best to celebrate right in the middle of the room, instead of leaving first. This leads to their undoing, or in this case, Richard's, as the snake gets up, or whatever the term is for a snake, and lunges towards Jill. But Richard manages to push her out of the way, resulting in him getting eaten whole. Let's just hope the man had a vor kink, so he would have went out the way he would have wanted to go. The plus to this is that Jill can grab Richard's assault shotgun to use, which is obviously better than the standard shotgun. The third choice, if it can be called that, happens if the snake attacks Jill just once. If it does, she becomes poisoned, and after leaving the attic, she will either pass out with her awakening in the save room where she got the antidote for Richard, or she will have to make the pilgrimage herself. These two poison scenarios are best avoided if possible, as they are a time sink, and don't really add anything to the experience. The fourth and final death mask, the mask without eyes, is in the greenhouse on the first floor. The mask sits on a wall at the end of the room, but it's guarded by these tentacles that would make an anime character blush. The way to rid the greenhouse of these tentacles is quite easy. If you recall, there was a bag of herbicide that sat in a wheelbarrow in a small outdoor section on the opposite side of the mansion. Simply placing it in the water pump by the entrance and turning the valve to the red setting kills this annoying plant. Just be sure to remember to turn it to red and not green, because if you do turn it the wrong way, all the herbs you can use in the room will die from the herbicide. With the way clear, Jill grabs the fourth mask, and with that, all four have been obtained, and can now be placed in their corresponding slots in the crypt. With each one placed, a chain dislodges from a hanging coffin, and when the final mask is put in, the coffin falls to the floor and opens. And to no one's surprise, it contains a corpse. But for some odd reason, this one is red. When Jill approaches it, the entrance becomes blocked by a cell door. The red corpse then reanimates and attacks Jill. This thing is called the Crimson Head Prototype, and it's the strongest version of a zombie you will come across in this game, with it having more health and dealing more damage than your average zombie. But with the shotgun in hand, it can be taken out quite easily, just as long as you don't underestimate it and allow it to close the distance. With it dead, Jill is able to grab the stone and metal object that sat inside the coffin. There is also a button inside that unlocks the entrance to the crypt, allowing her to leave. But now that we've been introduced to the Crimson Head zombie, I want to talk about the gameplay and new additions to this game before moving on. With this being a remake, the developers added a ton of new features, which made this the most in-depth Resident Evil experience when it released. But before we get to the new, let's go over the old. Even though the previous entry in the series, Resident Evil Code Veronica, strayed away from the series norm by using a dynamic camera that followed the player around, the Resident Evil remake stuck to its roots and went back to using fixed camera angles. If you know the series well, then you know what these are. But if not, then I'll quickly summarize them for you. Fixed camera angles are just that. Cameras fixed at certain angles throughout the game. They don't move or follow where you move your character, and instead, they change angles once your character reaches the end of the camera's view. And something that's usually paired with fixed cameras is a control scheme called tank controls. Once again, if you know anything about the series, or any type of horror game in the 90s or early 2000s, then you know what these are. I'll once again summarize them for the people who don't, so I apologize if you've heard this a million times already. But in order to save both yours and my sanity, I'm just gonna copy-paste my explanation from my last video. To explain this quickly, pressing up moves your character towards the direction they are facing, and pressing down has them slowly walk back in the opposite direction. And instead of strafing like modern games do nowadays, pressing left or right simply rotates the character. Wow! I couldn't have said that any better myself. Another staple of the tank control scheme is that you are unable to move and attack at the same time. In order to attack with any type of weapon, be it melee or ranged, you must first ready your character, which puts them in a stance that allows them to attack. This forces you to think about what you are fighting and where to position yourself when dealing with them. And while we're on the topic of the game's combat, this is where the game differentiates itself from the previous ones, as a ton of combat mechanics have been added to help flesh out the experience. The first thing they added are these items aptly named defense items. These helpful little things are all over the place, and don't take up any inventory space as they sit in a specialized spot. There are also 3 different types. The first, and the one you'll most likely come across, is the dagger. Both Jill and Chris have access to this defense item, and with it equipped, they are able to avoid taking damage from most front-facing grab attacks by stabbing it into the enemy. This will either happen automatically or manually depending on your settings. The next defense item, and the one that is unique to Jill, is the stun gun. Beyond the obvious shock the enemy receives, it also does more damage than the dagger. And regardless of which defense item is used, they are all consumed after one use. But if you already have more of the one you just used, then it will automatically equip another one for you. The stun gun obviously doesn't get discarded though, but its battery does, and must be replaced with another upon use. A reason you'd choose the knife over the stun gun is that it has the special benefit of being able to be retrieved, but only if you manage to pop the enemy's head right off their shoulders after the knife has been used. Chris's defense item is the flash grenade, and this one is my favorite of the 3. Upon being grabbed, Chris shoves the grenade in the enemy's mouth, which gives him time to get away. The grenade can then be set off by either shooting the enemy or waiting a small period of time. But when it does, and depending on what enemy it is, the grenade will blow their head right off. Just make sure you aren't close by it, as it will deal damage to Chris as well. An aspect of these that is more helpful with Chris, due to him having the grenade, is the ability to switch which defense item you want. I kinda wish they gave Jill a defense item that did area damage like they did with Chris. But that's just a small nitpick. Another new gameplay feature has to do with that fuel canteen Jill obtained back at the save room. It, paired alongside the lighter that Chris starts with, and that Jill grabbed in the room right above the save room, allows them to burn the bodies of recently defeated zombies. The reason why you'd do this is that from here on out, the zombies you have defeated can transform, allowing them to get back up. These transformed zombies are known as Crimson Heads, and they are a lot faster and do more damage than their original forms. But lighting their bodies ablaze right after or close to the time you dispatch them completely prevents this from happening. The issue is that the fuel needed for this process is a limited resource and can only be replenished a few times at the designated areas that house these kerosene containers. And because it's so limited, you can't just go burning every single body throughout the game. This forces you to think about where you'll need the breathing room the most and the areas you'll be revisiting later on. Another thing you'll need to think about is the inventory space. Carrying both the canteen and lighter uses up valuable inventory space that can otherwise be used for another weapon, ammo, healing items, or the most important of them all, key items. But there are ways to avoid bringing these. The first is to get a critical kill on the zombies. If you don't know what that means, to put it simply, it just means removing the zombie's head. And if there's no head, there is no way for the zombie to get back up in the future. Critical kills can be done with a handgun, but its chances of doing so are extremely minuscule. The guns with the highest chances of this happening are the shotgun and the magnum. For the shotgun to do this, you must aim up with it when the enemy nears you, and when you fire, there is a high chance it will remove the zombie's head from existence. The magnum, on the other hand, simply requires you to aim right at the zombie, and then it's up to chance on if the zombie's head will come off, but that chance is fairly high. The other way to avoid bringing the canteen and lighter is by using the grenade launcher's flame rounds in Jill's scenario. These just get straight to the point by lighting the zombie on fire, which prevents their future transformation. It also can be used on the bodies of zombies you previously defeated, which is extremely helpful and a nice bit of detail. Beyond that, this is your usual Resident Evil experience. There are herbs you can mix to heal your character, you need ink ribbons to save your game, and ammo is scarce. This is truly the best experience in the series thus far. It is difficult, but fair, and requires you to actually think throughout, thanks to the addition of the Crimson Head zombies. But with all that out of the way, we have come to the end of this section. Let's get back to the story. The object from the coffin can be placed in a slot in a passage just outside the hall that leads to the gallery. This unlocks a door leading to a shed, where there are two doors. The one to the right takes Jill down a muddy path, and that's when Barry freaks the hell out over the radio, saying that there is a monster in chains roaming around the mansion. I don't know about him, but there has been countless monsters already, so I don't know what he's freaking out about. Along the pathway are two rotating signposts, one red and one blue, each with a button that can be pressed. When pressed, the signpost will stop on the closest direction the arrow points to. When done, one of the two dog statues further down the path rotates to match the same direction as the signpost, and in between the two dog statues is a locked gate leading to the graveyard. The way to open it is by turning the dog statues away from the gate, ending their long watch over it, and allowing Jill access to the cemetery and a cabin on a hill nearby. While the cemetery does have something amazing in it, we will get to that when Jill returns from the cabin. Inside said cabin are a couple things of note. The first is a damaged family photo and a journal. Although the journal seems to be damaged as well, as there are only a couple of entries. And the ones that are left over seem to have been written by a small child. But what has been written is quite disturbing, as it goes over the kid's parents being attached in some way, with insides red, slimy, hard, and white. And shortly after their mom was attached, she stopped moving, but was able to scream. I honestly have no idea how to summarize my thoughts about what we just read. So you know what? I won't summarize it. Or even talk about it. Let's just move on. Past that odd and slightly off-putting read is a crank line on the ground. With nothing else in here, Jill can simply walk out the same way she came in. Except someone enters the cabin before she can leave. Quickly looking towards the door gives her a small glimpse of who I can only describe as the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But instead of being met with a misunderstood gentle soul, Jill is met with a bonk to the head, knocking her unconscious. When she awakens, she comes face to face. Oh my god, what the fuck is that? This person, thing, or whatever the fuck it is, clearly is no friend of Jill's, so she opts to run right past it, out the cabin door, and back into the cemetery, where she can get a nice palate cleanse from that house of horrors. Going into the grave part of the graveyard, Jill comes across two graves that stand out amongst the rest, with one having a very familiar looking slot. Inserting the wind crest into it rotates the slab, revealing 3 more crests, each one with their own symbol: a moon, a star, and a sun. On the back of each of them are buttons that project out shapes that allow them to be fitted into the other grave. When all 3 are placed, we are graced with the 44 Magnum's presence. This gun needs absolutely no introduction, and not because of how great it is, but because I already talked about it a while ago. So there's that. Heading back to the shed and out the second door leading to the garden, Jill is contacted by the still second best STARS pilot after dead Kevin, Brad Vickers. Guilt must have consumed him, as he is desperately trying to get a hold of anyone via radio. But unfortunately, Jill's radio is a lemon, so she can't respond to him. Looks like we're gonna have to die here to make him feel bad. And what a great spot too, as it's filled with fucking dogs. Past the garden, there is a pool that Jill can empty out using the crank from the cabin. The now empty pool can be crossed, leading to yet another garden area with a waterfall. But nothing can be done here just yet. So crossing the area and through a gate leads to a guardhouse. In the entry hall, there is a hole in the floor and a giant box. Just what exactly are the developers trying to imply here? Ignoring the warning signs here leads to a scene straight out from a Source Rule 34 video, as a tentacle pops out the hole in the ground and grabs Jill by the neck. Thankfully, this doesn't result in her death, but it's not something we want to repeat, unless you're one of those people. But I'm not here to judge. Pushing the box near the other two, covering one of the holes, allows Jill to cross unharmed. Going through the door and down the hall, Jill overhears Barry arguing with someone about some sort of deal, with there being mention of the destruction of the STARS unit, and Barry's family. But when Jill enters, Barry is all alone. He claims he was just talking to himself, and chalks it all up to the mansion getting on his nerves. I mean, we don't have any reason to not believe him. It's not like someone would betray us in this monster-packed hellhole, right? On a nearby table is a report about a rapidly growing T-virus infected plant at Point 42, ingeniously named Plant 42. Obviously, a plant being given a virus is a bad thing since it's written in this book, but what made matters worse is that its roots dug deep into the facility, where a scientist flooded the basement by destroying an aqua ring filled with chemically altered water. This resulted in the plant using the water for nutrients, growing even larger and spreading through more of the facility. But that still wasn't the worst part, as there was another way for it to gain nutrients, and that was by sucking its enemies, in a scene reminiscent like the one in Scary Movie. Okay, maybe wording it that way wasn't 100% correct, but you get the idea. Or at least I hope you do. Anyway, this Plant 42 sounds like it was an awful thing to deal with. Let's just be thankful the scientists risked life and limb to destroy it before we got here. Right? In the adjoining bathroom, there is a key with the number 001 on it. This unlocks a door all the way back at the entrance of the guardhouse. Entering this room's commode and draining the bath gives Jill the control room key, which requires Jill to go all the way back to the room where she ran into Barry. Instead of inspecting the shitter, going further in the room, you'll find 2 bookcases that are a little too far away from the wall. Moving them out of the way reveals a ladder that leads down into a cement hallway, with 3 boxes and a water-filled gap that Jill couldn't be fucked to swim across. If you know what was needed to be done in the original RE, then you know what needs to be done here. Yep, it's time to push the 3 boxes into the water so Jill can cross. If there is one thing I like about modern REs, is that I don't have to perform this type of manual labor in them. The box moving puzzles kinda got old a few games back. Crossing the box bridge takes Jill to the flooded basement mentioned in the report from a bit ago. Now, if you thought zombies, zombie dogs, bearded red zombies, regular red zombies, a giant snake, birds, even more zombies, even more zombie dogs were bad, then I have some bad news for you, as this is where sharks were being tested on. So who knows just how bad these things have gotten. Huh. Those look like regular sharks to me. Kind of disappointing, but I guess hungry sharks are bad enough. After Jill manages to avoid being eaten, and Raiden manages to
Avoid drowning.
she can use the control room key on a set of double doors, taking her to the room of the same name. Sitting by the ladder Jill took down to get here is a whiteboard with instructions to open valve number 3 if pressure in the room drops. But we don't have to worry about that. We're safe in this nice and cozy metal control room that has a beautiful view of all the little sharkies. But sadly, Jill needs access to the basement floor, so the water must be drained. Please don't take this personal, little guys. Holy shit! That's a big shark! Help me, Samuel L. Jackson!
We're going to pull together and we're going to find a way to get out of here.
Hell yeah!
We're going to seal off this.
No! Not you too! I guess the sharks are taking it personally. The pressure in the room starts to rise, so Jill must close the metal shutters over the glass the shark is breaking before the pressure gets too high. She must first release the safety mechanism for the pressure shelter, and then pull down the control lever which brings down the shutters. But something goes wrong, resulting in only one shutter closing and getting stuck halfway. The reason this happened is due to lost oil pressure. Heading to the hall nearby, Jill comes across 3 switches for the oil pressure valves, and she must press the correct one as time is running short. If you remember from a bit ago, the whiteboard we inspected mentioned valve number 3, so pressing that and releasing the safety mechanism once again allows Jill to pull the control lever, which successfully closes the shutters, sparing her from one hell of an ear popping. Heading through the now emptied basement and passing by a poor small shark that is flopping around, Jill comes across the spot where the giant-ass shark lies. And lucky for it, it managed to get stuck in a spot where there is just enough water for it to survive. What does it do with its second lease on life? By knocking over a key box that contains a key into the water right by its mouth. Aww, poor little guy must be hungry. Well, don't worry. After getting this key by your scary looking mouth, I'll bring you some food. So don't mind me, and I guess that's my fault for ignoring the giant-ass warning signs. After going through all that bullshit again, we opt to fry the shark by pushing a damaged generator into the water it's lying in and turning it on. With it dead, Jill can grab the gallery key while keeping all of her body parts intact. The gallery is chock full of locked doors, and it also has the amazing feature of a live beehive. The issue here is that the bees are of a hostile nature and chase Jill throughout the room. You know what this calls for, right? Yup, play the shitty Wicker Man remake bee scene. While the bees may be annoying, there is a way to deal with them. Sitting on a corpse riddled with bee stings is some insecticide spray, but you can't simply walk up to the hive and spray it. In order to use it, you must go back to the hallway and spray it through a hole in the wall that had a map sitting over it. Sitting under the now dead hive is a key that unlocks one of the doors in the gallery. In the room is a bookcase where one white book is wedged in between a bunch of red ones. Its contents go over a chemical called V-Jolt that can be used on Plant 42. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, along with the sharks that were floating around in the basement, Plant 42 has still been growing in the nearby room. So besides dying, the scientists here have done jack shit. But before we go and confront the plant that can suck a man dry, we should synthesize V-Jolt. The problem is that the chemicals needed to make it are locked behind a door with a strange keypad. Along with the usual numbers you find on any normal one, there are also 3 different eye symbols with their own colors. Just like in the original RE, the way to solve this puzzle is convoluted as all hell. The way to figure out the code involves a lighter, 3 different colored oil lamps, and billiard balls. I know, I sound crazy, but bear with me here. Back near the entrance of the guardhouse is a set of double doors leading into a bar. Lighting the oil lamps inside reveal the same symbols that were seen on the keypad. And on the second floor of the bar is a billiard table with 5 colored balls of note. But the colors that only matter are the ones that match the oil lamps, those being red, green, and orange. That gives us the numbers 3, 6, and 5. But before we head back to the keypad, there is a familiar looking red book sitting in the bar, so it's best to grab it while we're here. Back at the keypad, the color order is orange, green, and red, so all we have to do is base it off the balls seen with the same color, resulting in the numbers 5, 6, and 3 being entered in, which unlocks the door. Going through it leads to the medical room, where V-Jolt can be made. On the wall by the entrance are a bunch of equations leading up to the number 20. Also in the room are 3 small empty jars, 2 big jars containing chemicals, and a sink. The 2 big jars are labeled UMB number 3 and yellow 6. And in order to create V-Jolt, the chemicals must be mixed up to the number 20. If it was just the 2 chemicals, then you would know that'd be impossible. But that's where the sink comes in, as it counts as the number 1. So here's the mixing order to create V-Jolt. First, we need to mix UMB number 3 and water to create NP4. This is then mixed with yellow 6 to create UMB number 10. After that, we must separately mix yellow 6 with water to create UMB number 7. Mixing it with UMB number 10 creates VP17. Lastly, UMB number 3 must be mixed with VP17 to create V-Jolt. With the chemical in hand, Jill heads all the way back down to the basement where she first encountered the sharks. But with the water gone, she must take the long way. That involves her going through the control room where she emptied the water. To the room's right is the door to the guard room, and here is the spot where Plant 42's roots had been soaking up the chemically altered water. Throwing V-Jolt onto the roots makes them writhe around a bit, eventually shrinking up into the ceiling like my man bits on a cold winter morning. I'm sorry you had to hear that. With the plant weakened, Jill heads back to that bookcase where she got the V-Jolt report, and inserts the red book she got from the bar into the empty spot with the other red books. This is yet another puzzle, but an extremely easy one, as you only have to rearrange a couple of books to complete the image. With that done, a nearby cabinet shifts over, revealing a door that sat behind it, and when Jill goes through it, she comes across Plant 42 itself. Okay, I know you're probably thinking that there are a ton of low-hanging fruit jokes I could make here. And you'd be right. But I'm a changed man. And if I did use those jokes, many would probably be repeats from my original RE1 video. So I'm just gonna curb my tongue and see how the scene plays out. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Oh, thank fuck. Barry is here to help.
Barry!
Jill!
That's it. I can't hold it any longer. Get away, Raven. No. Fly, Starfire. They're grabbing everyone up in here. No. Much better. Since we created V-Jolt, we don't actually have to fight this boss, as Barry uses the flamethrower he came in with to burn this plant to a crisp. We could fight it if we didn't create V-Jolt, but I'll go over that during Chris's scenario. With Plant 42 dead, Barry decides to stick around the plant room for reasons unknown, and instead of thinking too much into it, Jill just grabs the helmet key from the fireplace and heads out of the room. But on her way back to the entrance of the guardhouse, she hears nearby gunfire. It's just STARS leader Albert Wesker, who's shooting at some bees. And while they're glad to see each other, Wesker brings up Barry's odd behavior, but thinks it's just the situation that they're in that's causing it. Jill tells him she'll keep an eye out, and before they part ways, Wesker tasks her with exploring the remainder of the mansion, which works out for her as she just got the key that will allow her to do just that. But right outside the guardhouse, she is stopped once again by Brad Vickers over the radio. And even though she concluded that her radio was broken, that doesn't stop her from trying to answer back to him. And when she inevitably fails to get in contact with him, she concludes once again that the radio is broken, even repeating the same 3 words she used the first time.
Shit, it's broken.
Back inside the mansion, Jill is able to access the last few inaccessible rooms thanks to the helmet key, the first of which is nearby on the 2nd floor. This is where we get the mother of all object pushing puzzles, which you know are my absolute favorite. In order to complete this fantastic puzzle, Jill must push the statue to the other end of the room and position it to the left of another statue. Sounds easy, right? That's because it is. But this room has the annoying feature of having its walls close in towards the center of the room, which obviously stops you from pushing the statue. So in order to be able to push the statue again, you must head behind the wall and press a button, which forces the walls back. Just don't take too long, or you'll become a Jill sandwich. Another thing you don't want to take too long with is pushing the statue to its designated spot, because the walls will start closing once again, forcing you to repeat the process. Like I said, this puzzle is easy. It just has the annoying time-wasting aspect thrown into it, which results in it being one of my all-time least favorite puzzles in the series. But when the statue is pushed into place, the wall in between the two opens up. The only thing of note in the next room is a dark hole in the ground, which Jill risks life and limb by jumping right into it. And lucky for her, it doesn't result in her death or a leg fracture or two, as it was only a small drop. By her feet is a red book, and when opened, reveals the Medal of Eagle, which has no use at the moment. The only other thing in this room, if you can even call it that, is a stone slab with a diary sitting on it, the owner of which is named Trevor, the same exact person that had a diary sitting in the locked room with the golden shield. The contents of the diary are pretty bleak, as Trevor found himself stuck once again, with there being no escape this time around. Before he arrived at this cramped spot in the mansion, he looked all over the place, even finding a lab where he discovered one of his wife's high-heeled shoes. Instead of giving up on the notion that his wife and daughter were still alive, he kept up hope that they were, but regretted bringing them to the mansion, as he ignored all the warning signs about the people he worked for, due to his obsession with designing it. In the last entry, he inspected the same slab we found the diary on, and to his horror, it had his name engraved on it, making this a grave. He had fallen into their trap, and in his final moments, he asked for his wife and daughter's forgiveness. When Jill inspects the grave, she finds a lone switch. Pressing it opens the grave up where a ladder can be taken down to a passageway.
Oh my God!
In one of the dead ends is a power supply with a blown fuse. Switching it over allows Jill to use the elevator in the nearby kitchen that goes up to a locked section of the 2nd floor, where the battery can be grabbed. This is a crucial item for a small environmental puzzle that we'll come across a bit later. Outside the locked section is the hallway with mirrors, where Jill obtained the golden arrow. In the adjacent hall is yet another helmet door, that leads to the trophy room. In the center of the room, sitting on a table, is a letter with a shocking revelation. It's directed to the Chief of Security, and talks of an X-Day, where the member of stars are to be lured to this mansion to draw combat data from their encounters with things called BOWs. Then, they are to collect 2 mutated embryos and dispose of yet another unknown called the Tyrant. And lastly, they are to dispose of the entire lab and to make the deaths of all employees and test animals look like accidents. With the letter signed off by Umbrella Corporation. So this was all planned from the start, to get all STARS team members out in this secluded location to be unwilling test subjects for all these monsters. Frustratingly, there are still many unknowns, like what is a Tyrant? Who are the people that are running this operation? And is there really a traitor amongst the STARS team? With no way of getting any answers here, Jill must push forward. And speaking of pushing, there are 2 cabinets for her to push in order to obtain 2 gemstones from 2 different animal mounts. There is a red gem and a yellow gem, and the only way to see them is by turning off the room's lights. This will cause both gems to light up, allowing Jill to grab them. But there is one small roadblock here. Against the wall in the center of the room is a raven statue that follows Jill around. And if you're too slow to grab one of the gems before the raven's gaze hits them, then they will lock into place. This can easily be circumvented by forcing the raven to look at one side of the room and walking under it to give Jill the allotted time to grab each gem. Not too difficult, but I am seriously getting burned out by all the object pushing this game has. And don't get me wrong, this is one of my all-time favorite Resident Evil games. But my god, they just couldn't help themselves with adding an insane amount of these fucking things. And while staying on topic, while also talking more about the gems, there is a blue gem that sits in the hand of a maiden statue on the 2nd floor of the dining room. Instead of simply grabbing it or breaking the arm off, we must push it off the 2nd floor, which shatters the statue. So now Jill has 3 gems. What are their exact uses? 2 of them can actually be placed inside an eyeless tiger statue nearby. Slotting the blue gem in turns the statue to the right, giving out shotgun shells. Slotting the yellow gem in turns the statue to the left, giving out an MO disc. But like many items we've gotten recently, this has no use at the moment. The red gem, on the other hand, does have a near immediate use. Going out the dining room and across the main hall takes Jill to a large art room, which obviously needed the helmet key to enter. There isn't much of interest in here, but the room connected to it has a jewelry box that the red gem can be inserted into. This causes a bunch of blue pieces to fall off the box, and they then must be fitted into the main slot on top of said box. It doesn't matter what angle it's in, just as long as the pieces are placed into the form of the Spencer family crest. Inside the box is a lone brooch that can be turned into a key that unlocks a single door that sits by the gallery. The room it unlocks is surprisingly peaceful. No music, no enemies, just the sound of nature coming in through a lone open window. It's quite the nice palate cleanse in all honesty. Just a moment to relax and reflect. It's actually easy to get lost in the calmness this room provides. And I found myself sitting here for longer than I usually do in a room so small. It really does make you think about the journey so far, and oh look! It's a flashback of what we've done so far. Oh god. Not more of this shit! Welp, I guess we're in this for the long haul. So, how's your day going? It must be pretty bad if you found your way to one of my videos. Is this over yet? Oh, thank God. With the time for flashbacks over with, Jill flips on a desk lamp and grabs a familiar-looking metal object off of a bookcase. The only difference is that there is no stone ring around it, like the one from earlier. But like a broken record, we will be getting to that soon. But first, we need to use the helmet key one final time. You guys remember the room with the horny knight? Well, there is a door at the end of that room that can be unlocked with said key. The room behind the door is the library, and this is where... Oh no, not again! Help me, Samuel L. Jackson! Oh, right. The giant snake appears once again, and it actually has a name. Its name being Yawn the Snake. The reason it's called Yawn is because that's what you'll be doing during the fight, as all you have to do is run around the bookcase in the center of the room and shoot it when there's enough distance between you two. This is a surefire way of not getting hit once. And it also works really damn well on a knife-only run, which I subjected myself to a couple of years ago, and will never do again. Also, while I may have been joking about its name, it's kind of true, as it's called Yawn due to how it opens its mouth before attacking. Unlike the attic encounter, Yawn doesn't get away this time, and slams right into the bookcase that made this fight a breeze. This knocks a book out of a glass display that was in the bookcase. And inside the book is the Medal of Wolf, which pairs with the Medal of Eagle that Jill found on George Trevor's grave. This item marks the final object of importance found within the mansion, and it's now time to head back out to the courtyard for that small environmental puzzle. All Jill needs to bring is the battery and the crank. With them in hand, she must cross the empty pool while avoiding poisonous snakes, insert the battery into the slot by the elevator, go up the now operational elevator, fill the pool back up with the crank, and head back down the elevator to find a now opened up passageway that was hidden behind a waterfall. The reason we had to do all of that is because the pool water that was drained out caused the waterfall to start back up, which hid the pathway from Jill. And with her inability to swim for any amount of time, we had to power up the elevator with the battery in order to fill the pool up so the waterfall could stop. The newly discovered passageway takes Jill down to a cave system that splits into two paths. One leads to a hole in the ground with a slot in one of the walls. This is where a crank can be used. Just not the one we have, so this will have to wait. The other path takes her to a room with a powered down generator that contains a shaft that's missing its other half. In the nearby room, if it can even be called that, is STAR's Bravo team leader Enrico. But this isn't a happy reunion, as he gives us the news we've all feared, that there is a traitor among STARs, even though he doesn't know who it is. And this mansion nightmare was a setup by Umbrella. Their conversation is cut off abruptly when Enrico catches a bullet straight to the heart. And with Jill's cat-like reflexes, she decides not to turn around to see who shot him, and instead ponders for a moment before trying to wake Enrico up from death. Near the now deceased Enrico is a crank, which is just what we've been looking for. So Jill grabs it and rushes over to the slot near the hole in the ground. Rotating the crank creates a bridge of sorts by, and I shit you not, rotating the rock wall until she can cross it. But that's just the beginning of the rock-related antics Jill will have to endure here, because in the next room, she must run from a boulder Indiana Jones style. Where's Chris when you need him? After avoiding being turned into a Jill pancake, things go from worse to worser, I guess, as there is a big-ass spider weirdly named Black Tiger in the next room. I don't know who named these things, but they must have been blind, as I'm sure you all can clearly see that that is no tiger. But don't worry, it has one fatal flaw that Jill can capitalize on. That flaw being its inability to move and attack at the same time. So she just needs to constantly stay near its back and rotate along with Black Tiger. And pretty soon, its ass blasts out green liquid like me on an all Taco Bell diet. Once again, I'm sorry you had to hear that. The door leading out is covered in webbing, but the developers were nice enough to leave a knife in the room so there would be no need to backtrack this time. Past the door, the crank comes in use one last time, and like a bad omen, A boulder sits in front of Jill at the end of the cave corridor.
Oh shit.
After cranking the crank 3 times, a hidden passage is revealed. And that's when the boulder dislodges from whatever lodged it and comes barreling, or should I say, bouldering, towards Jill. But the newly opened passage is there to save her from becoming a Jill Smashburger. Okay, I'll stop. Alright everyone, I'm going to be extremely honest and vulnerable for a second. By this point in our journey, we've had some scares, hopefully some laughs, and hopefully again, a good time. But this is where it stops for me. And it's because there is yet another goddamn item moving puzzle in the next room. Did they seriously need to keep adding these things in? It never ends, and I'm gonna lose it! I apologize. I don't know what came over me there. Okay, let's get this part over with quickly. Inside the room there are 2 statues, a crank hole, and a circular pad on the ground that rotates when you step on it. We must once again push the statue that's out in the open into the wall like the other statue. The problem is that it's facing the wrong way and can't be pushed into the center of the room due to it being too close to the wall. Pushing the statue further down the room, we see that part of the wall looks different from the rest. Placing the statue in front of it and using the crank pushes the wall outward, and using the crank again closes it back up, giving us just enough room to push the statue towards the center of the room. After spinning it on the pad 2 times, we are able to push the statue into the hole in the wall, which opens up a slot in the wall that contains a cylinder. This item can be attached to the shaft and inserted into the generator. When done, 4 buttons light up and must be pressed in the correct order to power it up. Where do we find the correct order for this? Well, it's on the shaft itself. When examined, we see 4 incomplete symbols, but they're clearly Roman numerals. Rotating the shaft to where we see the full symbols gives us the order of 4, 2, 3, 1. Inserting the shaft once again and pressing the buttons in that order powers up the generator and calls a lift up to the room. But before Jill can take it down, Barry pops in, saying a noise he heard brought him here. And to mix things up, they actually stick together instead of going their separate ways. At least that's what I thought. But as soon as the elevator stops, a groaning sound can be heard nearby, and Barry, being the paragon of gentlemanliness, tells Jill to go and find out what it is while he secures their escape route that they just came from. I'm sorry, but Barry is quickly becoming one of the worst STARS members. And that's saying something, because most of them are fucking dead. Well, at least he hasn't abandoned us like Brad did, so he has that going for him at least. Investigating the area where the groans were heard, Jill runs into the creature from the cabin. Since she doesn't want to get her shit rocked again, it's best just to juke it, which leads Jill to a room with a giant-ass box and a lift. I'm sure you can figure out what happens next. After sending the box away, Jill heads back to the Barrynator, as the 2 of them can probably figure out how to deal with this creature together. But just like everything I love in my life, Barry abandons us when we need him most. That's it, Barry. You're at the bottom of the STARS member list with Brad and Dead Kevin. Now that it's a solo act again, Jill finds the box she sent away on the lift in the same room as the elevator. Near it is a crusher that can be used to break open the box, which contains a now broken flamethrower. This can be used in the room with the creature, but it first requires Jill to pull a lever down, which brings out a latch for it to be placed on, unlocking the door it sits by. Just don't take too long placing the flamethrower, or else the latch will go back into the wall, requiring another lever pull. Heading through the door, Jill finds what seems to be an impromptu living area of sorts, with a dining room and a bedroom. On a desk by the bed is another box containing the stone ring for the metal object. Also in the box is a less damaged picture of the family like the one we came across in the cabin. On the back of it is the date November 10th, 1967, and written below it are a bunch of viruses and the names Jessica, Lisa, and George, who are all part of the Trevor family. It shows that the mother, Jessica, had been administered the progenitor virus and the type A virus, with her body failing to fuse with them, resulting in Umbrella disposing of her. The same can't be said for the daughter, Lisa, however. She too had been administered the progenitor virus, but also the virus type B, and while her body fused with them slowly, the results were positive, resulting in continued and protective observation. As for poor George, well, we already know his fate, with him being terminated on the 30th of the same month. But things get worse from here, as there is a journal paired with the picture. The first date is marked 4 days after Lisa and Jessica were infected by the viruses, and was clearly written by Lisa. On the 14th, she started to feel the effects of the viruses, and was placed in a room all by herself, where she feared that her mother escaped and left her behind. But only 1 day later, she seemingly found her mother, which made her happy. But after a short while, she concluded that it wasn't her real mother, due to her different insides. On the same page, she apparently found her mom's face again, and attached it to her own, claiming her mom would be sad if she met her without her face. The last entry, which is on the 17th, we see that her writing skills have regressed. But from what she wrote, it seems that her mother's true body was locked in a stone box, which she was unable to open due to 4 stones connected with chains. All signs from the previous journal entries, and the ones just acquired, point to Lisa being the chained up monster that's roaming around the mansion grounds. And while the viruses have deformed her in their own way, the most horrid aspects of her appearance all stem from her tearing the faces off of other women she mistook as her mother, and placing them over her own face. There is a bit more to say about Lisa and the horrible life, if it can be called that, she lived after being detained by Umbrella, but we will circle back to that after a short moment. Taking the ladder out of the room takes Jill all the way back to the cabin in the woods, to the spot right where she obtained the first crank. Combining the metal object with the stone ring and grabbing the other stone and metal object outside the shed, Jill can now insert both of them into the 2 slots on the fenced door behind the stairs in the main hall. This area, along with one other later on, is where the story can be altered greatly. But to keep things going smoothly, I'll go over all the changes and the repercussions that follow at the end of Jill's canon storyline. Through the door, down some stairs and a ladder, Jill runs into the backstabbing bastard Barry Burton. She catches him inspecting some sort of stone sarcophagus, and when he notices she's standing there, he tries to hide his magnum in the same manner that a kid would try to hide a candy bar they just stole when confronted by one of their parents. Barry then tries to quickly whip out his magnum towards Jill's face, giggity, but this fails miserably, as Jill swipes it out of his hand and points it right back at him. Before he can explain the reasoning behind his betrayal, sounds of chains quickly approach. That can only mean one thing, that Lisa has arrived. And if our past run-ins are anything to go by, then we are in for a rude greeting. We also get a closer look at her deformities, and the faces of her mistaken mothers. She even gives us a demonstration of her inhuman strength by destroying 2 stone statues on the opposite side of the room. I'd say I was impressed if she wasn't trying to kill Jill. Very pleased with Jill to hand over his magnum, and that is when a choice is given. To give or not to give? That is the question. The canon choice is to hand it over, so that's what we'll do. We are then thrown right into a boss fight with Lisa right after. And this fight has more of a puzzle element when compared to the others we have witnessed so far. In order to survive, Jill must push the 4 stones connected to the sarcophagus with chains. If you remember from Lisa's journal, this is the stone box her mother's real body lies in. And when all 4 stones are pushed off the ledge, the sarcophagus will open. This is made easier with Barry being armed, as he will fire upon Lisa, buying Jill ample time to get the task done. When it's finished, Lisa will stop attacking and call out to her mother. She'll then grab her skull out of the sarcophagus and leap off the ledge towards her apparent death. While this fight may not have been so bad, Lisa's backstory is absolutely soul-crushing, as she was experimented on to no end, and then held captive for well over 30 years. She never got to experience any sort of normal life for long, as she was just a child when Umbrella imprisoned her. And for what mental capacity she retained or relearned, it didn't age alongside her body. So she remained that small child that Umbrella tore the life from all that time ago. And for what little time she had been free, she spent it looking for the mother that was just beyond her grasp. While it wasn't revealed that she didn't die here, we do know that she does in the side game The Umbrella Chronicles. So it's at least a bit comforting knowing that she does indeed pass, and is finally able to rest. Examining Jessica's sarcophagus, Jill finds a copy of the family photo, and besides it is a letter meant for Lisa. In it, Jessica writes about how the scientists have treated her, with them constantly giving her different types of shots. And as the days drag on, she feels her consciousness slipping, fearing that she will forget George and Lisa, and the memories they've made, and even their faces. On the last few pages, she wrote of her hopes of escaping with her daughter. She implored Lisa that they needed to escape the next time they were placed in the lab together, and when they were out, they would search for George together. This letter being here obviously meant it never reached Lisa, and it's hard to truly say if that was a good thing or not. But that's enough dwelling. Barry tells Jill he doesn't think Lisa is dead, and decides to stick around while she runs on ahead. And even though he's been untrustworthy, Jill accepts the plan. Let's hope this doesn't bite her in the ass later on. Going through the doorway Lisa came through, and up a lift, leads to a fountain, where the eagle and wolf medals can be inserted into their respective slots. This results in the water being drained, where a hidden staircase leads to an elevator, taking Jill down to the underground laboratory. After stepping off the elevator, she is greeted with a giant metal door with a sign that reads, "Emergency Exit. Will not open unless in first class emergency." With all the letters being capitalized, we know this sign means business. Going down a ladder and some stairs, while skipping past a few locked doors, the first room of note that Jill has access to is lit up by an X-ray board. Sitting next to it on a table is a letter from one of the facility's researchers named John. It's dated June 8th, 1998, and was addressed to his girlfriend Ada. What he wrote to her was pretty bleak, saying that he has become infected, and tasked her with escaping the facility with incriminating evidence, and to release it to the public. But before escaping, he asked that she set off the self-destruct sequence, which required the release of the door locks in the security system. He set up a terminal for her to do just that, with the login being his name and the password being hers. But to unlock the entire facility, she needed another password, which he hid on the X-ray pictures in the same room as the letter. Since we're standing here, it's clear that Ada either never read this letter or skipped over the self-destruct part. I guess we'll just have to honor John's wishes ourselves. Sitting on one of the X-ray images is a small note, saying to place the images in alphabetical order. Grabbing the second image and placing it on the board with the other two that are already there, we simply need to place the names in alphabetical order, and to flip a switch that sits on a wall across from it. On each X-ray, a single organ is highlighted red, and taking the first letter of their names gives us the password cell. The terminal John set up is in the operating room, and entering all the information we got from his letter and the X-ray images unlocks most of the doors in the facility. To unlock the remaining few that didn't unlock from the terminal, Jill must head to the visual data room, but not before grabbing a slide filter from the room across from the one with John's letter. There's more in here, but we'll be coming back to this room in a second. In the center of the visual data room is a projector that the slides can be inserted into. Most of the slides are inconsequential, as they just show the T-virus infected creatures with their given names. The last three, however, are of importance. The first of them gives us a glimpse of what the tyrant looks like, with it looking almost human, besides the long arm with claws. The second is an image of the Bioorganic Weapons Research Group development staff. They all look like normal people, except for the one in the group who looks like he's there part-time and has a modeling job to go to afterwards. We may have seen him only a short time, but this is clearly Wesker. But Jill has fuck all to say about it for some reason. The third image gives us the code 8462 that can then be entered in on a terminal in the same room, which opens up a secret room that contains the laboratory key and a ton of monitors. You guys remember Kenneth? You know, the STARS member that died. No? I guess I'm not being specific enough. He was the STARS member that died at the beginning of the game. No, not Joseph or Dead Kevin. That's way too early. He died in the mansion. Not Richard. That's too far ahead. He died to a zombie. There, that's him. Well, when we inspected his corpse, we obtained a videotape. This is the spot where it can finally be watched. Just what major plot point or secret could it contain if it was brought all this way? Let's find out.
Hello?
It's me, Richard.
It's 1:30 in the morning. What are you doing calling me?
Sorry to do it to you, but we have a mother of a virus ripping through a major company file.
Okay, throw me some numbers. Okay, give me your password.
My password?
Out with it!
Oral cum shot.
Oral cum shot? Yeah, that fits. Holy shit! You know, there's not too many people around who can develop a sophisticated virus like this one.
Well, can you pull it out for us?
Well, yeah. But the virus has destroyed 75% of the program already. Why didn't you call me the minute it started attacking?
I tried to stop it myself, but I couldn't. I didn't want to have to call you.
Well, if Dell Tech wasn't so cheap, they'd have someone like me on staff full time. Don't touch anything. I'm pulling the virus out.
Thanks, buddy. I mean, I am sorry to call you about this.
Say, Richard, how many people at Dell Tech had access to this file?
I'm not sure. Why?
The virus that's destroying this file didn't come from an outside line. Someone at Dell Tech placed it there.
How can you tell that?
I guess you were sleeping during that chapter when Ted was training us.
Why would someone at Dell Tech place a virus?
I don't know. Why did you?
You're nuts. I wouldn't. You just...
Richard, I know your work.
Steve, I swear.
You never learn. You and your little fucking games. Well, I hope for your sake this file has a backup.
It doesn't.
I think I already know more than I want to. Okay, the virus has been transferred onto my disk.
I hope you can keep this between us.
I won't bill Dell Tech for this, but if they trace the transfer of the virus to me, I won't cover for you. Not again. Okay, bye.
So that's why we're here. Umbrella and Dell Tech must have traced our comms expert Richard. It's all starting to make sense. The lab key we just got can be used to unlock two rooms. The first is the morgue, which is something we'll come back to. And the second is the elevator entry hallway. This then leads to the dreaded power maze, which is filled to the brim with these bug fuckers, which I just found out are human-fly hybrids. So I guess the developers spent a little bit of time watching the movie The Fly. And before I go any further, I gotta rant for a minute. This place absolutely sucks ass on a knife-only run. And like its name implies, you can only use a knife. And that does not include the dagger defense weapon. So if you get grabbed by one of these Jeff Goldblums, which is an attack they love to fucking do, then your ass is grass, because they will insta-kill you. And while I'm sure there are people out there that can clear this area no problem with a knife, I am not one of them. So, and I shit you not, I ran back to the save room to save after every single kill. And there are 7 Jeff Goldblums in here. And by the time you reach this point in that run, you probably have already wished to do anything else in this godforsaken world. Hell, I even questioned why I was wasting away the only life I get on this planet playing the RE1 Remake knife-only run. But that's an existential question I'll think and cry about when I'm trying to go to sleep at night. Okay, rant over. When you clear this area out by killing the insects in the same way Jeff Goldblum's character Jeff in the movie The Fly gets done in, you are then given the honor of refueling the refueling device to power up the area. This is done by taking a nearby empty fuel capsule out of the refueling device and filling it with nitro in the room where we obtain the slide filter. And with the capsule now being filled with nitro, we are not allowed to run, shoot, or even get attacked, lest we want to turn Jill into a Jill ragu. I know I said I'd stop doing that, but I just had to here. And if it made no sense, then in layman's terms, it means she blows up, dying instantly. So you best have made sure to have cleared out the halls and the power maze rooms, or you're in for a bad time. With the long trek over with, Jill inserts the fuel capsule into its slot and powers up the elevator. But before she takes that down, there are 2 items she must grab, and 3 things she needs to insert said items into. You remember the MO disc that sat behind the tiger statue inside the mansion? This is where it can finally be used, but there are 2 more of them within the facility. The second is located right near the entrance of the visual data room, and the third is located inside the visual data room. Now onto the inserting part.
Oh yeah.
Alongside the 3 MO disc are 3 passcode output machines that they can be inserted into. It doesn't matter what order they're done in, just as long as you do them. This is also the second major change that can be done within the story, with the canon choice obviously doing them. The first passcode output machine is located in the room where the fuel capsule can be filled with nitro. The second is in the surgeon room, but Jill must crawl through the vents in the morgue in order to reach it, due to its doors being jammed. The third and final passcode output machine is in the second sector of the power maze. When all MO discs are inserted, 3 hydraulic switches can be lowered, opening up a giant steel door. Behind it is our main man Chris, who is locked in a jail cell. While the reunion is nice, the door is locked, with no way of opening it. Jill promises him that she'll return with a way to unlock the door, and heads to the now powered up elevator. Right before she enters it, Barry pops around the corner, and the 2 pair up for what lies ahead, or in this case, below. And what's there isn't much of a surprise now that we've seen the slide that clearly had Wesker in it. But when Jill sees him, she acts surprised. And she also acts surprised when Barry betrays her once again by pointing his gun right at her back. Although it's not something he actually wants to do. As Wesker explains, it's because he is holding Barry's family hostage, with the promise of not hurting them if he follows his orders.
Wesker, you're pathetic.
You got that right, Jill. Before Wesker rids the world of our beloved Jill, he decides to explain his motives for destroying STAR's team, saying that it's Umbrella's decision. And once he's destroyed STAR's and the facility, he would betray Umbrella as well. Before he delves any further into his plans, Wesker sends Barry up to the ground level.
Barry.
You gotta love Barry.
With Barry out of the room, Wesker tells Jill that Umbrella had nothing to do with him holding Barry's wife and kids hostage, and it was something he did for his own interests. And those interests have to do with the thing inside the liquid-filled tube to Wesker's right. This buck-naked, ballless behemoth is Tyrant, and Wesker is clearly infatuated with it. Right before he shoots Jill to get alone time with it, Barry bursts into the room and guns Wesker down in his prime. But while Jill and Barry get all sentimental with one another, Wesker, who isn't screaming out in immense pain due to a .44 round being fired right through him, manages to release Tyrant, with the hopes of it killing Barry and Jill. This doesn't go according to plan though, as it turns its attention to him.
Premature.
Man, I've heard that before. The Tyrant smacks him across the room and shifts its focus back to Barry and Jill. To his credit, Barry stands in its way to try and protect Jill, but instead of shooting, he tries to move closer to it, earning him a smacking, which now makes this boss fight a one-on-one. If you obtain the Magnum and saved its ammunition, then this fight is absurdly easy, as it requires only a few rounds to put down. You simply need to rush towards the lab's entryway and unload into the Tyrant. If you didn't grab the Magnum or wasted its ammo, then the grenade launcher is the next best option. Creating distance from the Tyrant isn't that difficult either, as it walks towards Jill at an absurdly slow pace. But if it somehow does reach her, then it can quickly take her health down from fine to danger. After it's dead, Jill checks on Barry and is relieved to see that he survived his encounter with Tyrant. When they turn to look over at Wesker's corpse, they find only a puddle of blood, as he somehow snuck past them. But he didn't just run off into the sunset, because as soon as Barry and Jill leave the lab, he activates the facility's self-destruct sequence. The two decide to split up, with Barry heading towards the exit and Jill going back to Chris's cell, which had its locks released thanks to Wesker attempting to blow the place up. She quickly apologizes for making him wait, and the two rush to the giant metal door she saw when she first arrived at the facility. They rendezvous with Barry here and head on through the big-ass door, and that's when Brad makes one final attempt to contact them, pleading for any sort of sign that they are alive, as he is running dangerously low on fuel. The group power up an elevator leading to the helipad, and that's when this trio turns into a solo act, as Barry and Chris hold off approaching monsters while Jill contacts Brad. To make matters worse, the self-destruct announcer warns of there being only 3 minutes left until the place blows sky high. And lucky for everyone, there are signal rockets right by the elevator doors that Jill can use to contact Brad. Chris and Barry show up at just the right time too, but the whole situation gets fucky when the Tyrant breaks through the ground and bitch slaps Chris onto his back. That leaves Jill and Barry to take the monster down. This fight is a bit more difficult than the one in the lab, but not too much more. While the best option was to create space between you and it in the labs, the Tyrant can close the distance rather quickly with his charge attack here, which will knock Jill to the ground. The key to this fight is to not get too far away from the Tyrant, and when it does get close, try to dodge its attacks by sticking close to its right arm, as it only attacks with its elongated left arm. The weapon of choice here is obviously going to be the Magnum, but if you don't have it, then the shotgun or grenade launcher do just fine. Also, Barry isn't just sitting there with his thumb up his ass, as he will actively shoot at the Tyrant, which helps dwindle its health immensely. When you deal enough damage, Brad will drop the rocket launcher for Jill to use. And when she does, there is a small chance where the Tyrant can deflect the first missile if it's facing towards her. I'm sure everyone lost their shit when they witnessed this the first time. But thankfully, a second shot decimates the monster. With it dead, the three get in the helicopter and watch as the mansion blows up. With the nightmare over, Jill gets her much-deserved rest, and the four of them fly off into the rising sun. Now, before I talk about the differences in Chris's playthrough, I'm going to go over the major choices that could be made throughout Jill's storyline. Then I'll talk about the game's design in terms of graphics, cutscenes, and character design. The first major choice is back inside Jessica's tomb. If we decide not to hand Barry's Magnum back to him, Lisa will smack him down the pit to his death, And to make things more depressing, a photo of him with his family falls to the ground and can be viewed after dealing with Lisa. Written on the back of it is a sweet message from his daughters, telling him that they love him. Such a nice way of making us feel extremely guilty for our choice. But as a way of sweetening the pot, we can pick up his Magnum, which is the strongest base weapon in the entire game. Besides the rocket launcher, of course. Continuing down this now Barry-less playthrough, Jill will only have to fight the tyrant in the lab, and not on the helipad. And since Barry isn't around to shoot Wesker, the tyrant outright kills him. And since he's dead, the self-destruct sequence doesn't go off. But on his body is a key that will unlock Chris's cell, allowing the two of them to escape. But because the mansion lies intact, we get the awful sight of the tyrant that is alive and well. Okay, now on to the next major choice. If you gave Barry his weapon, everything plays out like it did in the canon scenario. But if you didn't acquire the MO discs, or don't go downstairs to free Chris, then it will just be Barry and Jill escaping in the helicopter. Huh. I can't help but feel like we forgot something.
Hello? Anyone out there? It's me, Chris. Hello?
Nah, it's nothing.
Always wait up for you. Even today, my eldest daughter. I didn't mean to.
It's okay. He's alive. I just know.
The hell you do, Jill? You just blew up! Now for the lone survivor end. If Jill lets Barry die and doesn't rescue Chris, we get this bleak-ass scene of a tired and single Pringle, Jill, where the tyrant is still alive. Whoopee. And that's it with all of Jill's scenarios. Now let's shift over to the game's graphics and cutscenes. If there is one thing that I'm constantly surprised by every time I play the original release and the HD versions of the RE1 remake, it's how beautiful the games look. Even though the original came out over 23 years ago and the HD versions over 10. It just goes to show how much they truly cared about this project. From the beautifully designed pre-rendered backgrounds to the still stunning to look at cinematics. The artists and programmers should have their names enshrined for the work they have done here. But enough of me just throwing random praise their way, let's talk about why they deserve it. If you were a fan of the series at the time these games came out, then you were probably surprised to see the return of pre-rendered backgrounds. The mainline game released before this was Resident Evil Code Veronica, and that game had fully 3D environments. And if you had the fortune, or in this case, misfortune, of playing Gun Survivor at its release, then you probably thought that this was the direction the series was heading to. And absolutely no one would blame you, as it seemed that this was the case, especially if you looked at all the other games releasing around the same time, as they were all in 3D. But in an odd and genuinely smart choice, they decided to go back to using pre-rendered backgrounds in what I could assume was a choice made due to memory usage, a want to stick to the original's aesthetics, or possibly both. Regardless of what it was, I think we can all agree that it was the right choice. Obviously, I'm not talking bad about Code Veronica's use of 3D, as I still think the game looks great. But when compared to this game, it's night and day. And while I may be playing the HD version for this video, looking back at the original release for the GameCube shows it still holds up quite well today. When looking at this game, you can see that this was when the series started to go with a drabber color palette compared to Code Veronica's and the PS1 classics. Either this was done to contend with the Silent Hill series' more realistic approach to horror, or they just made the decision themselves, with no outside influence. Regardless of what it was, I think these darker colors help with the game's horror atmosphere tremendously. However, there is a part of me that likes the entries in the series that used more color for their environments a bit more. I honestly don't know if this is because I had to go through that weird point in time where all video game developers turn their games edgy and dark, or if it's just nostalgia's sake, but whatever it is, I will always love the environments in the original RE2 and 3 more than any modern Resident Evil. Though that's just my opinion, and yours may be the same as mine or completely different. But no matter where you stand, no one can deny how great the environments look in this game. The developers really knew what they were doing, as this is the most realistic looking Resident Evil game I've covered so far. And when compared to other games released around the same time, none really come close, besides a little known game called Silent Hill 2 that released 1 year prior.
Unreal.
And while this is a horror game, I find that I love the calmer locations the most, mainly those that use warm lighting like fireplaces. And the one that is my absolute favorite is the courtyard study, but we've already talked about that one enough. Aside from the environments, the character models all look great too, with most of the STARS members' faces being modeled off of real people. The two standouts among them is Jill's face model, Julia Voth, and Chris's face model, Matt Mullins. The reason I'm pointing them out is that they will retain these roles for many upcoming games in the series. And these two are the epitome of perfect casting. And when I think of these characters, I think of the versions that have their faces. The use of real-world models is something Capcom will do from here on out for every main character in the series. And just like the voice actors, they will be swapped out for another seemingly at random. So don't get too attached to a certain face for a character, as they may be gone in their next appearance. Besides faces, the developers decided to give Jill upgrades over her fellow STARS members. An upgrade so useful, so powerful, that top scientists around the world must have spent countless hours designing it. But thankfully, they had the time. They had the resources to add jiggle physics to Jill when she moves. So there's that. Moving away from the human characters, all the enemies you encounter are highly detailed as well. For the zombies, there are a good handful of different models strewn throughout, with the Crimson Heads also having their fair share of different designs. And while I could go over each and every enemy that can be found in the Spencer Mansion, I think talking about one of the remake's primary additions encapsulates everything great about the game's enemy design. That addition is none other than Lisa Trevor. The designers really went above and beyond with her design, showing not only how she was mistreated by Umbrella, with her hands still being restrained and her legs still shackled in prison chains that drag long rusted chains behind her, but also the extreme mental and bodily changes that occur when one is subjected to the T-virus. While she somehow retained the ability to speak, if it can even be considered that, she also was able to write a bit, which we saw in her journal entries. And while her writing skills are on the same level as mine, it could be attributed to her being restrained by Umbrella at a young age, and not being given a normal life. But I personally think it's from the T-virus, due to Jessica Trevor's writing skills seemingly regressing while she wrote a letter to Lisa. As for the physical mutations, Lisa got the benefit of becoming nearly immortal, with the downside of turning into whatever this is. Don't worry, those faces belong to some of her victims. This is her real face. But no matter what face you're looking at, Lisa will sometimes scream out, which is followed by tongues? Tendrils? You be the judge, flying out of all of her faces. And beyond what's going on with her facial region, I truthfully can't tell if she has an eyeball on her back or if it's some sort of sore. But regardless of what it is, I don't like it. Just like Code Veronica, this game uses two types of cutscenes. The first uses the in-game engine, and is the one you'll be seeing more of than the other. But because of how great this game looks, there shouldn't be any issues with that. If you recall from either watching my video on Code Veronica, or by playing it yourself, the developers used low-detail character models during regular gameplay, and increased the character models' details when cutscenes played out. That doesn't seem to be the case here, though I could be wrong. But it appearing that way is in no small part to how good the models look while roaming the mansion. And because it doesn't look like the models are switching between the two, The cutscene transitions appear buttery smooth, with you not getting whiplash over the quick change in character models. Between both scenarios, there is well over an hour's worth of cutscenes to watch, but it's hard to say if there's more in this game or Code Veronica, so let me know if you have the answer. But no matter which game does, this is a continued effort to make the series more cinematic, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. The developers over at Capcom, on the other hand, were looking to change that. So after the release of Resident Evil 0 a couple months after this game, they would alter the series and gaming in general in a big way. But that's a conversation that will have to wait. The second cutscene type, and the one you'll pretty much only see a few times in a single playthrough, are the CGI ones. When compared to the previous mainline entry CGI cutscenes and this game's, we see that there are huge differences, not just in quality, but also in color. This is once again due to their desire to shift into more genuine horror, rather than campy horror like this game's predecessors. Again, I have no problem with this, as I think they look amazing, but I'm still stuck on the older game's use of color for both cutscenes and environments. Granted, when you compare this game's CGI to the previous RE game, Code Veronica, this game's cutscenes look 10 times better, in no small part to their color usage. Or in this case, lack of color usage. Don't worry, I'm not complaining about it. I know I sound like I'm continuously flip-flopping between liking and disliking the darker tone this game has, but I genuinely do love how this game looks. And them going this direction also made a lot of sense, as gaming was headed that way at the time. And I guess it still kind of is. But I wouldn't want to change any of it, as I love the series no matter where it goes. And we also wouldn't want to lose where it's currently at. Aside from the beginning CGI cutscene, there are only 3 more that play during a playthrough. Those being the first zombie cutscene, the Tyrant introduction cutscene, and one of the 3 ending cutscenes for each character. I can only surmise that they didn't use too many of these cutscenes due to the ever-looming threat of memory usage. But that's not even a complaint, as they could have just thrown together a cutscene using the in-game engine, and it still would have looked amazing. But that's enough talk about graphics and whatnot. Now for Chris's scenario, we are going to do things a bit differently. Both him and Jill go through pretty much the same experience, with the only differences being who they interact with. For instance, Jill gets Barry Burton and Albert Wesker as the 2 STARS members she interacts with the most, while Chris gets Rebecca Chambers and Wesker. And just like Jill, he will come across Richard and Enrico while exploring the mansion and its grounds. With that being said, I will be covering all the differences he experiences, while skipping the puzzles and traversal, as I'd just be wasting your time. So without further ado, let's go over Chris's scenario. Upon their arrival to the mansion, there are only 3 apparent survivors, that being Chris, Jill, and Wesker, with there being no signs of Barry. But just like Jill's scenario, a gunshot rings out, which Chris decides to investigate, leaving Jill all alone with Wesker. Well, we know what that's gonna lead to. No, not that, you weirdos. Chris deciding to investigate all alone was quite the weird thing for him to volunteer for. Why? Well, it's because the dipshit somehow lost his firearm, leaving him with just his knife. The only plus to this is that he has more health than Jill, which makes using the knife less detrimental to him than her. And while we're on the topic of differences between him and Jill, let's go over the other ones. Like Chris having 2 less inventory slots than Jill, even though he's rocking the tactical cargo pants with 1,000,000 pockets on them. Another downside to our beloved Chris is that he lacks a lockpick skill set, which forces him to hunt for these tiny-ass keys to unlock the same doors and drawers that Jill could unlock from the get-go. But it's not all bad, because in the lockpick stead, Chris has his lighter, which frees up a spot when you want to light up some zombies with kerosene. Besides that, there aren't really any other differences that are worth bringing up at the moment. So let's continue on with the scenario. After experiencing his first zombie, Chris runs back to the hall to find both Jill and Wesker missing. Lying on the ground is a handgun that will be replacing Chris's non-existent firearm. Another weapon-related antic happens when Chris tries to grab the shotgun. Due to Barry being non-existent in this scenario, there is no one there to save Chris from being crushed in the marble room. In order to obtain it, Chris must find a broken shotgun to replace the non-broken shotgun, so he doesn't become a Chris crepe. Outside the attic where Jan the Snake resides, Chris runs into Richard, who isn't alone. Aiding him is Bravo Team's medic Rebecca Chambers, who gives Chris the task of retrieving a serum she left in another room in the mansion, so Richard doesn't die. At least, not yet. When he returns, Rebecca administers the serum, saving little Richard's life. As a thank you, he gives Chris his radio, needlessly pointing out that it's a radio, and then passes out. And due to the area Richard decided to take a catnap in being dangerous, Rebecca and Chris lug him all the way back to the save room where Chris got the serum. Rebecca then opts to watch over Richard, but tells Chris they will look for him when he wakes up. An added benefit to Rebecca being here is that she will heal Chris's wounds a couple of times if you return to the room. When the time comes for Chris to play the piano to obtain the gold shield, we discover that he sucks shit at playing it. But you know who doesn't suck shit at it? Bravo Team's very own medic and person who didn't just ditch Richard to play piano, Rebecca Chambers. She has an ear for music. And apparently, that ear also isn't human, as she heard Moonlight Sonata from Chris playing this garbage.
That sounded like Moonlight Sonata.
Rebecca tells Chris that she knows how to play the piano. And when she gives it a try, she actually starts off strong. But after a short while, she starts messing up. This is when we are given the option of allowing her to practice playing. But this turns out to be a false choice, as she will practice regardless of what option you choose. Her getting better at playing is also time-based, which means you can't just interact with her right after and expect results. Thankfully, all you have to do is go through a couple of loading screens to pass the time. But a nice detail they added is that you can hear her getting better at playing when passing by the room. It wasn't necessary, but I'm glad they put it in. When Chris returns, Rebecca plays the part perfectly, resulting in the wall opening up, which allows Chris to exchange the shields. After obtaining the shield key, Chris enters the attic where Jan awaits, and since Richard is out of commission, he must fight it alone. Simply defeating it or grabbing the mask and running results in nothing special happening. But if Chris gets bitten by Jan, he starts feeling the effects as soon as he leaves the attic. But lucky for him, Rebecca was nearby and rushes to get the serum for him, resulting in us playing as her for a short time. When she returns with the serum, she injects it into Chris, saving his miserable little life.
Killing me.
Heading down the muddy path leading to the cemetery, Wesker is the one to warn Chris of Lisa due to an absent Barry. Down in the flooded guardhouse basement, Chris finds that Richard somehow got here before he did, even though the doors leading up to this spot were locked until he got to them. Though we don't have much time to think about it because Richard gets eaten by a shark 10 seconds into the cutscene. But the son of a bitch did his duty. He pushed Chris out of the shark's way, thus saving his life, and ensuring his continued appearance in future Resident Evil titles. I mean, could you imagine if Richard was the one to survive and lead in Code Veronica? I'm not going to make an edit about it, as I asked you to imagine it, and because I'm lazy. Hey, I'm only human. After draining the basement, Chris can find Richard's assault shotgun sitting on the floor by the sharks. Adding on top of Chris's inability to use a lockpick or play the piano, he is also unable to create V-Jolt. I'm gonna be honest. With his skill set, or lack thereof, he belongs on Bravo Team, or as what I like to call them, Team Deceased, as by the time this game wraps up, all but one of them dies. Okay, let's get back on track with V-Jolt. Because Chris lacks a skill set of any kind besides shooting things, that's what he has to do with Plant 42. Hey, that rhymed. This fight isn't that difficult, especially if you brought the Magnum along. But I guess that's every fight in the game. All you gotta do is dodge the tentacles and avoid the plant's fluids. Using the stairs in the room helps make this job a lot easier. And after a couple of shots, the plant will be dead and buried. Get it? Because it's a plant? Ah, forget it. So what happens if you want the fight to be even easier? Well, there is a way to create V-Jolt in this scenario. Just not as Chris. If you manage to let Richard die by not retrieving the serum in time, a whole different scene will play out the moment you walk into the room with Plant 42. Instead of it releasing Chris gently onto the floor like last time, it will keep a hold of him. But luckily for Chris, Rebecca is in the room nearby and comes to his aid. He chucks the white book that contains the information on how to create V-Jolt to her and asks politely if she could hurry in its creation. We then get to play as Rebecca, but nothing differs much from when we created V-Jolt as Jill, besides it switching control back to Chris right after throwing the chemical on the Plant 42's roots. If Plant 42 was fought without V-Jolt, Chris would run into Rebecca right outside the boss room, and he would let her down lightly on Richard's death, completely avoiding telling her that he got eaten by a shark and suffered immensely. But as a way to cheer us all up, we get this nice typo in the game's dialogue. Rebecca heads to the room where V-Jolt could be made and sets up a makeshift medical room, but expresses that she's glad that Chris is still okay. If Rebecca helped him defeat Plant 42, she would come running up to him once he leaves the boss room, and this is where Chris tests out his comedy routine.
Yeah, I think we got to the root of that problem.
Boo! Because she already knows Richard is dead, Rebecca hands Chris his radio, telling him that Brad tried to reach out and is flying around the area, but has no means of contacting him. She then rushes to the chemical room, and that's about it for this section. Speaking of Rebecca, the moment Chris enters the courtyard study, she screams from the room above. Rushing up to the room, we see that she's been cornered by a hunter, which is this frog lizard fuck ugly thing. Here is where one of his major story choices can be made, but I'll cover the non-canon parts at the end like I did with Jill's scenario. After dealing with the hunter, before they split up, Chris and Rebecca talk shortly about finding their missing team members and getting out of the mansion.
Stay cool and use your better judgment.
Inside the boulder tunnels, Chris runs into Enrico, who is more hostile with him than he was with Jill, even claiming that Chris was the one who betrayed Stars. Enrico aims his weapon at Chris, but gets shot himself by an unknown assailant. Another difference here is how Chris deals with the boulders that Jill had to avoid. If you played RE5, or you just have knowledge of a certain badass scene near the end of the game, then you know our man Chris breaks boulders for breakfast. This is where his boulder bashing gets its start. He may not be smart enough to mix chemicals, or skilled enough to play the piano, but he is bulky enough to clear insignificant rocks from his path. He is trained day and night for this type of scenario. So all he's got to do is turn towards the boulder and... Ugh! I guess he's not ready yet. Let's just move on. Before fighting Black Tiger, Chris is able to grab a working flamethrower off a wall panel. Doing this locks the door leading back to the generator room, but allows him to use it for the boss fight. It's kinda short-lived, but it's the only flame weapon he gets, due to not having access to the grenade launcher. Down in Jessica's tomb, Chris finds Wesker already fighting Lisa. Wesker, being his naturally calm self, simply tells Chris to take a piece of the action. In both his and Jill's scenario, Lisa can be dealt with in an entirely heartless way. If you opt to just pump bullets into her, you can actually push her off the ledge, unceremoniously ending the boss fight with her. But regardless of how you dealt with her, Wesker stays behind to investigate, while Chris goes on ahead.
A little further.
After finding and using all the ammo discs, Chris discovers his partner Jill inside the cell. She tries to warn him about Wesker being the one who betrayed them, but he already knows, due to the image on the slide filter. Just like in Jill's scenario, the door can't be opened, so Chris promises to return and heads to the lab's 3rd floor.
Just wait, I'll be back.
Okay.
When he calls the elevator to reach said floor, Rebecca comes up from behind, as she has been following him since the garden. They finally pair up and head down together, finding none other than Wesker. Following his long-standing tradition, or I guess in this case, starting that tradition, Wesker begins to reveal every single detail of his plan. But there is one too many witnesses here, so he guns down poor Rebecca without batting an eye. After releasing Tyrant, Wesker gets impaled by it and chucked across the room, resulting in his death. On his body is a note from William Birkin. It pretty much brings this game's story as well as Code Veronica's together with Resident Evil 2's, as William wrote a note about discovering the G virus and couldn't wait to see Alexia's face when he revealed his research. When Chris goes back to check on Rebecca, he finds that she is no worse for wear, thanks to her bulletproof vest. When the two take the elevator back up, she reveals her inner pyromaniac, telling Chris that they should blow the place up to get rid of all the research related to the T-virus. She goes to activate the self-destruct sequence, and Chris heads back to the jail cell to get Jill. The three of them rendezvous at the giant metal door near the lab's entrance, and make their way to the heliport. But just like what happened in Jill's scenario, they split up, with Rebecca and Jill holding some monsters off while Chris contacts Brad.
Chris, you just get in contact with Brad somehow.
During the final Tyrant fight, Jill is knocked down, leaving Rebecca and Chris to finish the fight. In the helicopter, Jill passes out on Chris's shoulder, and Rebecca is also getting her much-earned rest, as she has been through more than any other STARS member. This is me hinting at this game's prequel, that has Rebecca as one of its main characters. But that's for another time. The four of them fly off into the sunrise, and the game ends. And that's the good ending for Chris's scenario. Now let's cover the bad ones, with the one where Rebecca dies first. If you decide to ignore her screams or stand still in the room while the hunter gets closer to her, Rebecca will sadly not survive the encounter.
Rebecca!
A visibly torn and speechless Chris falls to his knees, seeing the youngest of STARS team lifeless on the floor. And since she didn't survive the encounter, Chris confronts Wesker all by his lonesome. After being complimented by him, Wesker roundhouses Chris's ass to the floor. But this being Wesker, he doesn't kill him, and decides he wants Tyrant to do his dirty work. This goes exactly how it did last time, with him being impaled and tossed aside like a piece of trash. On his body is a key that can unlock Jill's cell, due to the self-destruct sequence not being activated. The ending scene is pretty much the same as the previous one. Minus Rebecca, of course. Now onto the ending where we forget Jill. Everything plays out as it did in the good ending, besides the obvious exclusion of Jill. And after her obliteration, Rebecca tries to apologize for nearly dying earlier, but Chris tells her that she did fine. It's just that the case was way too weird. No mention of his poor partner Jill whatsoever. Yeesh. At least Jill thought your ass was alive, dude. If you opt to reach the single Pringle ending, then Rebecca dies by the hunter, no self-destruct sequence initiates, Jill gets left in the cell, and the mansion remains intact. When Chris is in the helicopter, we clearly see he's been through some shit. I mean, we just witnessed it all, but you can tell the weight of it all is, weighing on him, I guess, as he is staring out the helicopter's window. Just what could be on his mind? I may have an answer. No, bitches? I apologize profusely for that. Beyond those endings, both Chris and Jill have alternate endings. The way to achieve these is by getting their respective companion STARS members to the helipad, only for them to die against the Tyrant. The only thing that changes is that they aren't there for whichever ending you're going for. And that's all she wrote for the story of the Resident Evil 1 remake. So just what is considered canon? Well, it's most likely a mix of both Chris and Jill's story, as Rebecca and Barry were both inside the mansion and survived. I like to think that one of them being locked in a cell isn't canon whatsoever, and they split up at the very start, each experiencing their fair share of horrors throughout, with it all culminating in the four of them fighting the tyrant and escaping in the helicopter. Well, most of that seems pretty obvious. Capcom hasn't really given an exact answer of what happened inside the Spencer Mansion. So, we just gotta go old school and use our imaginations, which is something that pretty much died in me a long time ago, as all that's left in there is gotchi-mochi memes and crippling depression. Besides the different endings, there are also scenes that can be missed if you stick to playing through the game the same way every single time. Like playing as Jill, for instance. When you start, you obviously want to grab the shotgun as quick as possible. But if you go past it and continue on as normal, Barry can instead be found outside near Forrest's body, where an entirely new scene plays out. After the scene ends, attempting to grab the shotgun like normal isn't possible anymore, as Barry won't be around on the first floor to save Jill from being crushed. The funny thing is that the scene with Barry being near Forrest's body is one of the only ones like it. It doesn't trigger from failing to do something, or by failing to avoid taking damage of some sort, like being attacked by Yawn, but instead simply happens by either forgetting to pick up an item, or by putting it off as long as possible. To be honest, I can't really recall if Chris has any like this, as most of his require an action or inaction for it to happen. Kind of odd, but no point in sitting here trying to figure it out. On to the unlockables. This being a Resident Evil game, you would expect that there would be unlockables. And that expectation would be right, as this game comes with a good amount of them. Upon completing the story on any difficulty, you will unlock an alternate outfit for the character you played as. But that's not all, as there are 2 more outfits for Jill, and 1 more for Chris when you clear the game a second time with them. The first outfit for Jill looks like a sort of military getup. This one is alright in my opinion, as it kind of reminds me of Sarah Connor from Terminator 2. Jill's second outfit is her BSAA uniform from Resident Evil 5, which is only part of the HD remaster of this game. Her third and final outfit is the best of the bunch, as it's her iconic look from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. That game being my all-time favorite in the series obviously makes me a bit biased towards it, but you can't deny how great it is. Like I said a bit ago, Chris only gets 2 outfits compared to Jill's 3, and his first one is whatever the hell this is supposed to be. His second is his BSAA uniform from Resident Evil 5, and just like Jill's, this is only in the HD remaster version. Personally, I really like both of the characters' BSAA outfits, as I hold RE5 in a very special place in my heart. As an added benefit for Chris only getting 2 outfits, is that switching his also switches Rebecca's outfit. She gets this cowgirl outfit that makes it look like she got lost on her way to a rodeo or line dance. Paired alongside your first outfit unlock is the closet key, that can be used to unlock the hidden wardrobe room on the first floor of the mansion. In the back of the art room is a painting that can only be unlocked with said key, and this room allows you to switch your outfit at any moment, which is nice if you aren't happy with the choice you made at the character select screen. Now for the unlockable game modes. When beating the game on normal difficulty for the first time, you unlock the real survival mode. In it, none of the item boxes are linked, which means you're going to have to do a lot more planning during a playthrough. This is also considered the game's hard mode. You take a lot more damage and find a lot less resources. This is truly the real experience when it comes to the Resident Evil remake. So if you're looking for a fair but decently challenging mode, then this is it. The next mode unlock is after you complete the game on normal for both characters. That is when the One Dangerous Zombie mode is permanently turned on. You guys remember Forrest Speyer, right? The poor idiot that I made a Forrest Whitaker joke about, and the guy that somehow managed to get killed by birds? Well, Now the pesky fucker is roaming around the mansion strapped with enough explosives to level the entire place. If you run into him and accidentally or purposely attack him, then say goodbye to Jill or Chris, as they aren't a part of this planet anymore. While this mode can be fun for a playthrough or two, I kinda wish they gave us the option to enable and disable it whenever we pleased. A silver lining to this is that he strictly roams the mansion, and once you obtain the 4 death masks and reach the shed leading to the guardhouse residence, he will be gone for the rest of the experience, even when you return to the mansion later on. Now, if those 2 modes aren't enough CBT for you, then this last one will surely appease you. After completing the game twice on any difficulty mode, the invisible enemy mode becomes an option. Now, I hope I don't have to explain what this mode does, but on the off chance that I do, I'll make it super quick. The invisible enemy mode turns all enemies invisible. There. That's what it does. And if you really want to experience pain, then you will want to beat this mode in under 5 hours, because doing so gives you a small message from Shinji Mikami and a representative of the development team. The letter is actually a nice read, as they congratulate you and express their gratitude for you experiencing all that there is in this game. As for weapon unlocks, there are only 2. The first is the Samurai Edge handgun, which is unlocked by completing the game on normal or higher difficulty in under 5 hours. It has unlimited ammo and fires in a 3-round burst. The final weapon unlock, and the one that most likely doesn't need any introduction, is the anti-tank rocket launcher. This is unlocked by completing the game on normal or higher difficulties in under 3 hours. It also has unlimited ammo, and will decimate any enemy in one shot, truly making it this game's most powerful weapon. They even gave it a different design than any of the previous rocket launchers, giving it a more sci-fi look, which I really like. And that's all the unlocks in this game. When compared to the last mainline entry in the series, Code Veronica, this game is packed to the brim with extra content. But I kinda wish they had a mercenaries mode of some sort. I think it would have been awesome if we were given the option of choosing one of the many STARS team members, with the task of reaching a certain point on the map in the quickest time possible, while also rescuing other STARS members, akin to RE3's mercenaries mode, that allowed you to rescue other characters. And it being a mercenaries mode, every selectable character would have their own specific loadouts, so the mode would continue to feel fresh. This is not me complaining about what we were given here, as this game has a ton of content to experience. It's just that every Resident Evil game that has a mercenaries mode always racks up a good amount of playtime for me.
Ciao.
Welp, it's that time once again where I decide to talk about the game's soundtrack and voice actors. So, let's do just that. Just like Code Veronica before it, the Resident Evil 1 Remake had 3 composers behind its soundtrack. The first was Shusaku Uchiyama, who was the game's lead composer and arranger. Shusaku Uchiyama was no stranger to the series by this point in time, as he worked on Resident Evil 2's soundtrack a couple years before. He also composed for a few Mega Man games, and would compose for more RE games in the future. The first of the 2 composers that worked under him was Misao Sembongi. Before working on this game, she composed for Devil May Cry, working under longtime Resident Evil composer Masami Ueda. This won't be her last contribution towards the series, as she will be the lead composer for one of the biggest Resident Evil titles. The second composer to work under Shusaku Uchiyama was Makoto Tomozawa. Before working on this project, he already had a long list of works under his belt, with titles like Mega Man X, the original Resident Evil 1, and Dino Crisis 1 and 2. Unlike the other 2 composers he worked with, this would be his last time composing for the Resident Evil series, but not for Capcom overall, as he would compose for Mega Man 10 and would be the sound designer for Street Fighter IV. Before they even started to work on the remake's soundtrack, lead composer Shusaku Uchiyama set out with the goal of making the soundtrack be as atmospheric as possible, acting as a sort of background character instead of a lead in the spotlight. He also didn't want to skip over all of the music tracks that were created for the original 1996 version, as he wanted people who played the original to experience a type of old fear when playing through the remake. This led to him splitting up their works into 3 different categories. The first of those categories were re-recordings of the original 1996 game soundtrack. But they didn't just do that and head home, as they only picked a handful of tracks to re-record. This then led to the second category, which were reimaginings of certain original tracks. And while that may sound like a fancier way of saying re-recordings, I assure you, it isn't. And that's coming from someone who has absolutely no musical talent whatsoever. But if I'm wrong, don't be afraid to shit on me in the comments. The third and final category required a lot more work, as it involved creating entirely new tracks. And adding on top of the already large order of making new music, they had to make sure they had the same feel as their re-recordings and reimaginings. And when it comes to differentiating those 2 categories, I use the save room theme for the re-recording and the final boss fight track against the tyrant as a reimagining. Here's a part of the 1996 version save room theme, followed by the remakes. The reason I say it's a re-recording is due to there being almost no differences between the 2, besides one sounding crisper than the other thanks to better technology. This is just one track though, and there were plenty of others that had been re-recorded, like the theme that plays in the main hall. But it would waste both our times if I went through the whole soundtrack. So let's move on to the reimagining sample by listening to both versions of the final fight with the tyrant. As you can hear, the remake's version is just different enough to consider it a reimagining, as there were some additional elements put in it while also retaining the feel of the original. And just like with the re-recordings, there are plenty of other reimaginings throughout the soundtrack. Some of the easiest to find examples of the newly created tracks can simply be found when accompanied by the new content added to the remake. The most notable one, of course, is found at the altar location, where Lisa is fought one final time. Regardless of what category a track belongs to, the composers managed to keep everything consistent, as the soundtrack is dark and moody throughout, which was what they were going for with the remake. That makes this game's soundtrack the scariest one in the series thus far, and in all honesty, I personally think it retains that title to this day, even when considering the first-person REs and the newer remakes. But does that make this game's soundtrack better than the originals? That's an extremely tough question, as it fully depends on your thoughts and feelings about the original and the remake. Do you like a campier experience, or a more horror-filled one? I stand somewhere in between. I know, it's a bitch answer, but I do love the remake's dark and atmospheric feel. But I also love the more diverse soundtrack that accompanied the original game for that exact reason. Although it could just be my unchecked ADHD saying all that. But no matter what your preference is, the composers truly outdid themselves here, as they have crafted an amazing soundtrack that also gave this game a feeling that no other Resident Evil has. It really does have that background character feel to it, as most of the tracks are very subtle, like someone standing off to the side in every cutscene and every tense moment. You feel their presence, but it's not an overbearing one, and the ones that stray from this feeling are few and far between, which is in no way a bad thing, as they help you feel the emotions that they, and the moment they are tied to, are trying to convey, with the most obvious and standout one being the save room theme. The moment you walk through a door and hear this track, you feel an instant relief. This is in no small part due to how loud this track plays compared to most others. It's not standing off to the side like a side character. It's instead standing front and center, wanting your attention. A room that does the opposite of this, but still achieving the same effect, is the courtyard study. There is absolutely no music in this room, but instead, we hear the sounds of nature, with it just being a light breeze whispering through an open window. Some may find this unsettling, while others, like me, find it extremely relaxing. The sound designers and composers truly knew what they wanted to do with this game, and it is heard in every single room throughout, which makes this game a masterclass in sound design for me. After this game, two of these composers would return to the series to compose for Resident Evil 4, which I'm sure you know is considered one of, if not the best in the series. So it will be quite nice to compare what they've made here with the game that came out a couple years after. But I've talked enough about this game's music. I'll now shift over to the voice actors. Surprisingly, the cast of this game was quite small. And while the argument could be made that all Resident Evil games have a small cast, this one had more so, due to many of the voice actors playing more than one character. To both their credit and their directors, they all have done a great job voicing their characters. They all come off as believable, and I can't think of there being even one line of dialogue that was done poorly, which is quite a stark contrast when compared to the original version of this game. From this point forward, most of the dialogue in the series is quite good, and depending on your preference, that may be a good thing or bad. But that's enough ranting. Just like my other RE videos, I'll first cover the voice actors that voiced only lesser roles, then move up to the ones that voiced the main characters. That first brings us to Dan Hagen, who voiced Stars Bravo team leader Enrico Marini. Before his role, Dan Hagen began his career in the year 1990, with him having a bunch of small roles in all types of media. His most standout role at the time was in the video game Star Wars X-Wing Alliance, where he voiced the droid co-pilot MK.
We must not blow our big jam.
Afterwards, he continued to play small roles in movies, television series, and video games. The two standouts amongst them are as Kronk in the Ratchet & Clank series.
We're sort of stranded above the stratosphere awaiting rescue. But don't worry, when they get us, we'll get you.
And as Master Eon in the Skylanders series.
I have been waiting for you. I am Eon, your guide in this world.
And while these roles were a long while ago, his career is still going, as he is still getting roles to this day.
Enrico, don't come any closer, Chris.
The voice of Brad Vickers and Joseph Frost, Adam Paul, started his career in the mid-90s, His very first role was the voice of David Krugel in the dub version of the anime miniseries Tekkaman Blade 2. Around the same time Resident Evil released, he had voice roles in Final Fantasy X and Invader Zim. And besides his Resident Evil roles, I specifically know him for the characters he played on Invader Zim, with Bill being the character that sticks out the most.
Beautiful, isn't it? It's a message from creatures much more intelligent than us, space beings who have traveled millions of light years to say something. But what does it mean?
After these roles, he played small parts in both video games and TV series. And beyond that, he wrote, directed, and acted in a handful of episodes for the TV series The Inspectors between 2018 and 2019, with those being his last roles at the time of me writing this.
Brad!
This is Brad. If you can't answer me, somehow give me a sign.
It's now time to talk about the 5 main characters in the game. And I'll start it off with STARS Bravo Team's medic, Rebecca Chambers, who is voiced by Hope Levy. Just like Dan Hagen's career, hers began in the year 1990. And between then and the year 2002, when this game came out, she only had a small amount of roles in TV shows, shorts, and animated films. After her role as Rebecca, she continued to act in both TV and movie roles, but seemingly prefers doing voiceover work for games and animated projects, as they take up a majority of her works, with her doing them to this day. And beyond acting, she also enjoys working on musicals, and writes and sings her own songs.
He seems to have been bitten by a poisonous snake, but the size of the bite mark is huge.
The voice of Barry Burton, Kenneth Sullivan, and apparently Forrest Spare is Ed Smarin. He began his career with this game, and around the same time of its release, he also did voice work for the video game Dead to Rights, where he voiced the corrupt prison guard Sickle.
When you get to hell, mention my name.
These would be his only voice roles for quite some time, with his final one being in 2009 for the video game The Conduit. When it comes to acting, he only did it for a couple of roles, with his last credit being in 2013 for one episode of Jobless the series.
Oh, you heard. I think age is starting to take its toll. Talking to myself is becoming a bad habit.
Albert Wesker's voice actor, Peter Jessup, has had the most prolific career out of any cast member for this game. Before its release, he had only a couple of voice roles and one acting role, but afterwards is when he really started to get well-known roles. In 2005, he voiced Inquisitor Lim in BioWare's forgotten RPG classic Jade Empire.
Gao's ships are only small flyers. They're good for short-range flights and raiding villages, but not for long journeys.
And in 2009, he voiced Sovereign in BioWare's space opera and I Should Go simulator Mass Effect.
What they chose to call us is irrelevant. We simply are.
He then went on to voice a character in both of Bethesda's beloved RPG series, with him voicing Paladin Dance in Fallout 4.
I appreciate your honesty. If I appear suspicious, it's because our mission here has been difficult.
And Mirek the Dragonborn in Elder Scrolls V Skyrim's Dragonborn DLC.
So you have slain Alwyn. Well done. I could have slain him myself back when I walked in the earth.
This is me just listing off only a small fraction of the roles he's been in. And if you looked them up, I'm sure you'd find a game you've played that he has had a voice role in.
Though both you and Barry seem to think I was following Umbrella's orders.
Now for our 2 leads, with Chris going first. Chris Redfield's voice actor, Joe White, has had quite an interesting career. He started it in the late 80s, but took a small break right after until the late 90s, when he did voice work for Disney's Tarzan. But he didn't only do just that for the movie, as he also helped with the movie's visual effects. This is something he would continue to do throughout the years, with movies like Treasure Planet and The Princess and the Frog, to name a few. And while he may not have worked behind the scenes on other animated films, he kept on doing voice work for movies and a few video games, with his most recent credit being the Keeper's voice in The Keeper's Diary, a Biohazard story in 2024, which is a crowd-funded film made by well-known lifelong fans of the Resident Evil series, like Residents of Evil and Biohazard Declassified.
Chris Redfield, Alpha Team. We're here to rescue you. Richard, what the hell happened to you?
Last but certainly not least is our leading lady, Jill Valentine, voiced by Heidi Anderson Swan. Before playing as Jill, she had small roles on both Xena Warrior Princess and Murphy Brown. Afterwards, she only played one live role in an episode of The West Wing and a single VO role in Killer 7 as Samantha Smith.
Oh, that felt good. Talk about relieving stress.
And while that may be the end of her acting credits, she has a credit on the pre-production team for the Disney animated film Bolt. Many years would pass before she received another credit, and when she did, it was for something very personal to both her and a family member. In 2017, the book, A Night in Jail, was released, with her brother, Kirk Anderson, being the author, and her being the co-author. It's inspired by Kirk's actual life, and is about how smoking pot while having a mental illness could disrupt one's life in almost irreparable ways. Both she and her brother then went on to create 2 shorts for the book, one in 2017 starring the late Michael Madsen and his son Max Madsen, and the other in 2019, which had more unknown actors in it. That same year, the audiobook would be released, with it being narrated by Quentin Flynn, who voiced Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty and Axel and Lee in the Kingdom Hearts series. As of now, that is all of her credits, but there is an upcoming project written by her called Kickback V, with no real release date.
Well, I guess we were right about this mansion being quite unnatural.
And that is another Resident Evil game down. What can I say that hasn't already been said about the Resident Evil remake? This game is truly a masterpiece, as everything just works. From gameplay to story, this is the best way to experience true survival horror, and is the perfect starting point for anyone looking to begin playing the series. The only thing I'd change is that weird first playthrough difficulty selection. They should have just made it like every other game, to be honest, as it hides the fact that the choices are between very easy, easy, and normal. Usually choosing the middle option is the normal difficulty, but not here. So keep that in mind on a first playthrough. Where the series goes from here is well known to many, unless you consider going back a bit with the prequel to this game, Resident Evil 0. Which a good amount of people have issues with, but I'll save going over that for the video I'll inevitably make on it. The crazy thing is, this game is 23 years old, with it nearing 24. And with RE2 and 3 getting remakes pretty recently on Capcom's Reach the Moon engine, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they will remake this remake for the current generation. But that's just a speculation right now, as nothing has been said. For what I'm going to work on next, it will probably either be Silent Hill 2 or Dino Crisis 1. But if you made it this far, I'm always open for input. So if you'd prefer another game, be it Resident Evil, the other games I mentioned, or something else entirely, don't be afraid to leave a comment with a suggestion. But if it is a mainline Resident Evil game, then I'd prefer it to either be RE0 or the original RE4, to keep things going in the order of release. With that all said, I truly hope you liked the video, as I spent a lot of time trying to figure out stupid shit to throw in it. I hope you have a great remainder of your day, and I hope to see you in the next video.